Are you excited for the Mandalorian movie? I'm just gonna go out on a limb here, but I don't think you are. I think most of the people watching this are not excited. Isn't that crazy? There's a new Star Wars movie, and we're just not, we just don't think it's gonna be good. And what's more, I've seen the trailers, and I think that this movie could be good. There are a lot of interesting things I've noticed that I think could work really well. Rada the Hutt, in particular, is very interesting. I mean, yeah, is it stupid that they're bringing it back? Sure. But a muscular Hutt that fights in a, like, arena? That's cool. That's interesting. Embo is one of my favorite bounty hunters. His appearance in the trailer was clearly just, key jangling for the nerds, but it worked on me. So, on the one hand, I think this movie has a lot of potential. But on the other hand, I don't trust Disney to actually fulfill that potential. So, I've come up with a solution. I am just going to write my own Mandalorian movie. I'm not doing a full script, but I do think that my ideas should be gamed out. So, I did write pretty much a scene-by-scene breakdown of what I think the Mandalorian movie should be. If you don't plan on watching this movie, then perfect. This can be your headcanon. As far as you're concerned, this is the movie until Mandalorian Season 4 comes out and we see that Mando's missing a hand or whatever. And if you did see the movie, even better, you can compare the two. If there's something I did that in hindsight seems really obvious that the Mandalorian movie should have done, or vice versa, if the real movie does something and it's kind of a no-brainer that I didn't think of, like, that's interesting. That's why I wanted to get this out on May 22nd, or preferably before then, but I'm recording May 21st, so, Either way, I would love to hear your comments, letting me know what you think of how I did, how I could improve. However, if you like my pitch more than the actual movie, first off, aw, but, don't be a dick to the people that wrote the real one. Making a movie is really hard. I'm sure that if any of the writers were sitting down in their room just coming up with what they thought would be cool without any concerns for studio mandates or editing that happens within the filming process because something that you thought would work in the writing room doesn't actually work when you film it. Like, there's a lot of aspects that make movies in particular really hard. So, I'm not trying to say that I'm smarter or cooler or sexier than any of the people that wrote the movie. So, before we get into it, let's go over my goals, because I think that's important. My first goal is to do something with the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. He has been a pretty static character in the show, and the movie is a really good time to do something about that. I recently watched the best Batman movie of all time, Batman 1966. This came between seasons 2 and 3 of the show, so it's in a very similar position to The Mandalorian Grogu 60 years later. What I noticed about that movie is that it does something with Batman's character. Batman falls in love with this mysterious Russian woman who gets kidnapped, and he's, irrationally, really focused on getting her back. And at the end, he learns that that Russian woman was Catwoman the whole time, who is the main villain of the movie, which, that's cool for 1966. And he's distraught. I mean, Adam West, I love the guy, but he doesn't do distraught super well. But the writers understood that we're making a movie here. We have to do something different that wouldn't happen in one of our regular episodes. Second is to just give Grogu some stuff to do. I wanted to give him a huge character arc, but it's really hard. This character is a puppet, but he is a character, right? He's been treated like just a MacGuffin in the first couple seasons, but he made a choice to not be a Jedi. So, he can make rational decisions. So, let's do something with that. Let's give him character. Now, the most obvious way to do this is to have him speak, but I'm not going to do that for reasons that I'll explain probably after. So, let's give him a couple decisions to make. Third, make this a standalone story. the fucking Mandoverse has been leading up to some big culmination with Thrawn and Ahsoka and all sorts of stuff. I don't care about that. The Mandalorian is not suited for that kind of story. I think there should be an Ahsoka. Well, I don't think there should be, but I think there will be an Ahsoka movie that deals with all of that. So we are going to just deal with some smaller stakes or high stakes, but not Thrawn based and not a culmination. We're going to deal with a new threat and ignore any old established stuff. As a corollary to that, we want to have the Empire as villains, but we also can't denigrate Thrawn in case Disney ends up making that Ahsoka movie where he's the villain. Next up, take inspiration from the trailers. I already mentioned I think Rada is a really interesting character design. I'm going to include Embo in my movie too, although not his dog. And I'm going to include Ward, the rebel character played by Sigourney Weaver that's probably replacing Cara Dune. And otherwise, where I can, I'm going to take inspiration from what I figure the movie might be going for. I'm definitely not going to create what I think the movie is going to be, but, I'm going to try to take some inspiration visually. I don't know what number I'm on, but act as if I'm working at Disney on this movie. I don't know what the actual constraints are, but I'm going to try to keep myself in some sort of constraints. So there has to be some fun Grogu shenanigans, and people can't swear, and the good guys have to win, and the bad guys have to be not too morally complex. Stuff like that, Finally, make it fun. And fun is subjective, so I made it fun for myself. I'm not Disney. I don't have to, hit every target demographic. I went for cool and a little stupid, but lots of cool characters, like the Hateful Eight kind of thing. Just all sorts of interesting criminal guys. If that's not your idea of fun, sorry, it's my video. We open with a scene of Rada's fighting pit. I'm not a director, but I imagine a slow build-up before we see the fight. We hear sounds of melee combat, but we focus on shots of audience members watching and cheering, placing bets and eating nasty Star Wars snacks. Finally, we see one of our fighters, a droid holding a sword or something, staggering backwards. It gathers its bearings and runs back into the fray, where we get our first shot of Rada the Hutt destroying it with his axes. Rada laughs and asks who's next. An announcer emceeing the fight announces that the next challenger is a real treat, a Mandalorian. Wonderful. If half of what I've heard about their kind is true, he'll be a shoo-in. We see a humanoid silhouette approach through some dramatic smoke, revealing Boba Fett. Boba is not here to fight, which he tells Rada. He's just here to ask Rada to leave Tatooine alone. Rada says that if Boba wants control over Tatooine, he can fight for it. I don't have dialogue, but I like the idea that Rada recognizes Boba's gaffy stick and says something racist about Tusken Raiders to get Boba really mad. They fight, with Boba using said gaffy stick and Rada using his axes. No blasters are fired. The fight is over fairly quickly, with Boba coming out on top. He goes to strike a killing blow, but gets tased by Rada's droid guards. Boba is then forced by two of those guards into a large dorm-like space with a few other bounty hunters. One of them approaches him. Boba? Bosk. They greet each other warmly, but in a macho, cool way, so maybe like the muscle dude handshake. Bosk is excited. I heard rumors you were alive, but I didn't believe you would leave bounty hunting behind. Who finally brought you out of retirement? Boba says, no one. I'm just here on my own behalf. Bosk is like, moving up in the world? Boba says, something like that. Who are you working for? Bosk says, same as always, the Empire. So I will be coming in at the end of like a lot of scenes and in the middle of some scenes if it's necessary to give commentary on my explanations for why I made certain decisions and what part of the story we're at and like what I believe that any certain character or event accomplishes in the story. If that starts getting annoying, I did include a version of this video without any commentary. That's just like the movie. It's a theatrical cut. The link for that is in the description. It's unlisted. Okay, a lot to unpack here. We'll go over Rada's character a little more later, once he has more dialogue and we figure out what he's planning. But to be clear, he is speaking English, or Galactic Basic. What is going on with Rada? Why are all these bounty hunters coming to fight with him? Ooh, who knows? We're gonna find out later. Next, let's talk Boba. I don't really like what his show did with him, making him all sympathetic and responsible, but if you're gonna do that anyway, then that's fine. Let's stick with that, let's work with it, and that actually feeds pretty well into this movie. We put a sympathetic face in the group of bounty hunters before Din gets there. Now he is thrown back in with a bunch of bounty hunters who he has not talked to since before Return of the Jedi, and obviously he's changed a lot since then. So these people are similar to how he was before he went through his character development, and he's going to have to deal with that. Bossk is especially interesting here for a couple reasons. First, recognition, he was in the movies, but also we know that Bossk and Boba were friends since Boba was a child. So this is an especially startling face for him to see if he's trying to not think about his past. Now, I scrolled through Wikipedia to make sure that Bossk wasn't dead or anything, and he's not, but he did have a bit of a falling out with Boba, which does throw a bit of a wrench into this, but I think it's fine. Boba and Bossk are bounty hunters. I feel like they'd have the kind of friendship where they just laugh off things like that if it's been over a year. Finally, I want to talk about why Rada has droid guards instead of your normal motley crew of diverse alien pirates. I think that's a lot of fun, but we're going to have a bunch of bounty hunters in this, so it's going to be confusing if the Rada's guards and the bounty hunters look the same. Exterior shot of that little hut that we last saw Mando and Grogu living in. Before we get into it, I just want to establish that in my head, this takes place in 14 ABY. This would be 3 years after the kind of date that we think Season 3 took place in, although they're really bad with dates. So I'm saying this takes place in 14 ABY, and there has been a significant time skip from Season 3. This gives our characters time to grow and change, but also settle into a comfortable pattern that we can then break with the inciting incident. Inside, Din Djarin is dressed in full armor, but with an apron over, making some space breakfast. He wakes up Grogu, who's groggy and unreceptive. Din makes him get up anyway, and they sit down for breakfast. Grogu refuses to eat, and Din asks what's wrong. Grogu makes a little motion, miming for Din to take off his helmet. Din hesitates for a moment, but takes it off, and they eat together. Din and Grogu finish eating, and Din puts the helmet back on. He does some generic getting ready to leave stuff, then Grogu brings him a piece of armor. This one. "You want me to put that on you?" And Grogu just stands there, not responding. "I know you can fashion it yourself, Grogu. I've seen you do it." Grogu continues to just stand there. "You're going to have to put it on yourself one of these days. What can I offer you to convince you to do it?" Grogu motions for Din to take off the helmet again. "When I'm dropping you off, in front of your teacher and the other children?" Grogu babbles, making it clear this is what he wants. Din just grumbles and fastens the armor to Grogu, refusing. Din drives Grogu in a speeder, or whatever, into the big Nevarro city, and drops off Grogu at school. Remember that classroom from the show? Yeah, Grogu goes there full time now, at least when they're on Nevarro. Din tells him some pretty stereotypical parent stuff, and we're generally just doing comedy here. I'm not even going to attempt relatable parenting jokes, but I have one idea that Mando tries to leave and the school teacher tells him that they don't know what to do with Grogu since he's clearly intelligent but can't talk, and Din is just like, try your best. This is what we call the ordinary world. A couple scenes that set up what's going on, what's normal before the inciting incident messes up everything. You'll notice that Din and Grogu are both acting a little different than you might expect. Grogu is definitely 100% wanting Din to take his helmet off, which is something that was not clear if it was true in the show. And Din is acquiescing. He's taking it off when it's not a huge emotional moment, just to, have breakfast with his kid. I think that a 3-year time skip gives us time to have these sorts of things. I explained my reasoning for why I want this for Din's character in a whole other video, You don't have to agree with me, but please keep that discussion over to that video. If you want to leave me a hate comment, it would be better served in that video than this one. Also, Grogu wanting him to take off the helmet kind of settles the debate. Like, you got to take it off if your kid, like, wants you to. Which, obviously, that's a reason that I'm inventing, but, you know. Also, the thing with Grogu not wanting to put on his own armor, that's a thing about him being more independent. I wrote that at the very beginning of this process when I didn't really know where these characters were going to go. I have given Din an arc about being overprotective of Grogu, so maybe it would be better served as a reverse, where Grogu, like, wants to put it on himself and Grogu's fussing and he wants to do it himself. I don't know. However, when Din and Grogu separate, the camera keeps following Din. He goes home, takes off his helmet and some of his armor, and throws on a poncho that covers the armor he's still wearing. Then he walks to his nearby watering hole, or a coffee shop, it doesn't matter. Here we get a scene with some kindly alien bartender, where Din can talk about what he's been going through recently in vague terms. I don't have dialogue, but here's the information I want to communicate. Din has not spoken to his family in a while. The way he's speaking is intentionally vague, but we the audience should understand he means his Mandalorian clan. His family taught him to be closed off and separate, and that's what he's used to, but he's a father now, and he needs to learn to be more free with himself in order to be a better parent. That is why he's at this random bar. It's hard for him, but he's trying to come out of his shell. This is obviously a double entendre because he's secretly trying to get comfortable going out without his armor, but his cover story is that he's trying to relearn how to connect with people, which is also kind of what he's doing by taking off the helmet. It's also important to stress that Din is hiding who he is. He is willing to show his face to strangers, but only because they don't recognize him as the Mandalorian. So this is kind of an allegory. I mean, I wouldn't draw attention to this, but this is an allegory for, you leave your family to go to college or whatever, and something about you changes. This could be an allegory for, like, being gay or, like, changing your religion. I don't want to draw attention to any of those specifically, but, that's there. The thing is, there really isn't space for the Children of the Watch to exist in this movie as an entity. I have the Empire and Rada the Hutt as separate things, and then there's the good guys, there's the New Republic, but also Din, who isn't totally part of the New Republic, even though he's allied with them. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think adding the Children of the Watch is just too much. There's not space for them, and there's especially not space for Bo-Katan or any of the stuff she's up to. During the conversation, Din's comlink starts ringing. He ducks out of the establishment and considers taking the call there, but instead rushes back to his hut and puts on his helmet and then calls back. It's IG-11, the marshal of the town, saying that Colonel Ward from the New Republic is here to speak with him. To be clear, I hate that IG-11 is back, but he is, and we're dealing with that. I don't want to retcon, he is alive. Plus, we do need some sort of leadership figure for the town for a later scene, and Carl Weathers, the actor, passed away. So IG-11 is kind of the best option for this role. Speaking of Carl Weathers, I don't know how we would deal with this. You could, and my guess is the movie would do this, where it's just like, oh, he's just busy somewhere. The character's totally alive. He's just not around. I think the best way is probably to say that he died somewhere in the time skip. You don't even have to say it out loud. There could just be a mural of oh, rest in peace. There's a big thing of Carl Weathers, and it's sort of a tribute to the actor, but it's also letting you know, that's what's been happening in the world. This character, I think his name is Geef or something. I don't even remember. He's dead. The community mourned him, but, it's been a while. It's not recent. Everyone's healed. I think that's the best way to handle it. But yeah, no, I'm not including Carl Weathers in my story. That's one of those things where I have to make it realistic. We're not fucking CGIing him back to life. That's ghoulish. I hate that practice. Din arrives in full armor to a building that IG-11 lets him into, which we have not seen yet in the show. Din sits down, and opposite is Sigourney Weaver's character, Ward. Mando says, "I'm not doing the Rada job." And Ward says, "It's a matter of galactic security. We really need you on this one. We agreed I would take jobs hunting Imperial warlords. Nothing too long, Nothing too dangerous. There are at least 3 warlords involved in this, and probably more, and if they get what they want, the Empire will return. What are you talking about? Do you even know what the Rada job is? I know it involves the Hutts, and I know you don't get involved with the Hutts. In that case, let me at least explain what's at stake. Ward then fiddles around with the table until it emits a hologram of Rada the Hutt. She presses play or something, and we see a message. Greetings, scum and villainy of the galaxy. I am Rada the Hutt, son of Jabba the Hutt himself, and I have recently come into a far bigger inheritance than I know what to do with, so I've decided to give it all away. I possess 1/7 of all Hutt space, including 164 systems, and a liquid prize of 20 million credits. These will be given to the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Any bounty hunter, assassin, cutthroat, or other rogue may come to Nar Shaddaa and join me in my fighting pits for a friendly spar. Blades and fisticuffs only, no explosives or energy weapons. Beat me, and you will move on to the next stage. And fear not, my greedy, weak friends. Each fighter is allowed 1 patron to fund their efforts, for the reward to be split between patron and warrior. The warrior gets the credits, along with anything the patron may promise them, and the patron gets the territory. May this begin many a wicked partnership. We gotta talk about Rada. So, my thinking is Rada is in the fighting pits, and he's rich, so he's there by choice. Why would a Hutt do that? My answer, he's kind of crazy. He is the Feyd-Rautha to Jabba's Baron Harkonnen. He loves the danger, he's kind of a freak about it. So that naturally extends to, he's willing to risk his life for glory and fun, so he's willing to burn the majority of his assets for that as well. Now, this isn't to say he's a good person by any means. He's still very selfish and greedy. It's just a greed for attention and glory rather than, financials. And hopefully you can already see both similarities and differences to Jabba. Aesthetically, Rada is very different to Jabba. Rada is young and energetic, while Jabba is sedentary. Rada is willing to make big moves, while Jabba mostly sits in the back and just passively collects income. And, obviously Rada speaks basic and he's very eloquent, whereas Jabba is just growling in his own language. But Rada and Jabba are very similar in the places it counts. They're both greedy and violent and sadistic, and they both do not care about the lives of others if it gratifies them. They also both have a flair for the dramatic. I don't know if you remember, but Jabba is crazy. He throws people in dungeons with monsters. Instead of executing his prisoners, he flies them out to the Sarlacc pit to drop them in a mouth so they're slowly digested. Jabba was a crazy, dramatic guy. So Rada is similar. He just wants to be the center of attention in that drama. The hologram cuts off, and Ward leans in. We know of at least 3 high-ranking Imperials who have become patrons for bounty hunters and successfully entered into the second phase of Rada's offer. The Remnant is trying to pack the group with as many of their people as possible. It sounds like they're going to team up and pick off the other contestants, and you want me to be one of those people? If the Imperial Remnant wins that territory, they'll have a foothold to start rebuilding their power. Thrawn has returned, Din. He's uniting the warlords. All he needs is a defendable planet in the known galaxy to start building bases on, and now Rada the Hutt is going to hand them to him. The New Republic doesn't have many physical fighters. You're the best chance we have. You could throw in a couple lines here justifying why the Jedi aren't involved, like they're busy with something else. Din says, "So you want me to win whatever context Rada has planned, and then just give the territory to the New Republic?" Ward says, "No, you just need to get us in. Our intelligence tells us that Rada will move everyone that makes it past the first stage, both fighter and patron, to a remote planet where the true contest will be. Get me there as your patron, and I'll summon the New Republic to arrest everybody there." Din thinks for a moment, considering, but he says no. "I'm sorry, it's too dangerous. I have a child to think about. Find someone else." So this is called refusing the call to adventure. It is a very basic screenwriting thing. Every story does it. Structurally, you kind of have to. It's good in our story for pacing because we just learned about half of the deal with Rada, and then we're going to learn about the half of the New Republic, about what their plan is. And if we learned all of that at once, it would be way too much. So we get some time to breathe, to process, and then we can come back to it later and learn the rest of the plan. It's also good because it establishes Din as very protective of Rada, probably more so than he was in especially season 1, but the show as a whole. Like, Din does not want to risk, he especially doesn't want to risk Grogu's life, but he doesn't even want to risk his own life because then Din would not have a father. At this point, we check in with Grogu's classroom and just have some hijinks that, again, I am not going to write. And the class ends, and Grogu is picked up by Din. We get a quick montage of the rest of their day, which includes Din taking off his helmet once or twice at Grogu's insistence. At the end, we see Grogu in bed and Din beside him, ready to read him a story. And here is that story. I know you like hearing about Mandalorian history, but our story tonight is about the Hutts. I couldn't get anything about them from the New Republic, so this is an Imperial source. A swath of the galaxy is compromised of Hutt space, dominated by the criminal Hutt families. Despite many attempts by the Old Republic to civilize these systems, an array of natural and Hutt-made defenses has prevented them. The glorious Emperor has chosen not to waste precious resources trying to fight these monsters, especially since they pay 20% of all galactic taxes. Within Hutt space, the Hutts reign supreme. Almost any crime is tolerated on these planets as long as it benefits the ruling Hutt. The most powerful Hutt is Jabba, who has gained dominion over 100 systems. His power is attributed to his long career, which is credited to the fact that he lives outside the borders of Hutt space in some far-off neglected system. Din puts down the tablet. That's where it ends, but every bounty hunter knows what happens next. Tatooine was that neglected system. Nobody really knows how Jabba died, but his sail barge went to the Sarlacc pit with a horde of guards and a few rebel prisoners, and only the rebels came back. Then came the succession crisis. Every Hutt leader with a connection to Jabba, and half the ones who didn't, tried to take some of the territory. So many bounty hunters died in the conflict, the guild made it a rule to stay out of it. You go to Hutt space, and you get your head blown off, was what I was told. But it looks like the crisis has been settled. Rada, I guess, is of age now, and he must have legal ownership over the territory, or legal by Hutt laws anyway. And now he's just giving it all away. He has all the short-sightedness of youth and the most desired thing in the galaxy. It's going to be chaos. But don't you worry, kid. I'm not going anywhere near that bloodbath. By this point, Grogu is asleep, so Din goes to his own bed and goes to sleep. This is the perfect time to explain why I wrote actual dialogue instead of just bullet points. I mean, I did put bullet points for some scenes, but in this I wrote out the full thing that Mando says. And it's rough. It's a very rough draft. You do not have to like it. I think that this whole script, it would have to use like 3 edits to turn into an actual good movie script. But I think it's important to have dialogue because it shows how you put in all this information. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. We are first learning why Din hates the Hutts. Not hates the Hutts, but he's scared of the Hutts. It's something you don't want to get involved with. I like that it's outdated. I also like that Din tells stories to Grogu, but they're sort of horrible, violent stories, because Din is a fighter. You know, he's not a perfect father, and that would be a way in which he's not perfect, as he exposes Grogu to all sorts of violent stuff. Like, Din is totally the dad who takes his young children to see a horror movie. Also, the world building about the Hutts and this sort of succession crisis. This is made up. This is not canon. I made it up. Based on a cursory Google search, I don't think it contradicts anything, but if you've read the comics or the Aftermath novels and you can come in and tell me, like, no, this contradicts, so-and-so, please let me know. I think it's useful. I think it gives a concrete reason for Mando to be scared. It also gives a reason for why this whole Rada stuff is happening now and why he has so many assets that he can just give away. There was a conflict, and he came out on top. Din is woken suddenly by Grogu screaming. He's clearly in distress. Din tries to calm him and says there's nothing wrong, but at this point, sirens start going off. Din puts on his armor as fast as possible and runs out with Grogu. The two get to the town square, where IG-11 is trying to calm the growing crowd. He announces that the volcanoes on the other side of the planet are beginning to release toxic gas that will cover the entire planet in a few days. There is an evacuation order in place. Someone yells, asking when they'll be able to come back. IG-11 says it will be safe to return in no more than 4 years, to a large outcry. Someone else asks if there's no way to make it safe faster, and IG says, not without a planetary air detox, which is a technology not accessible to any of you. How much would it cost? Mando, you do not have that kind of money. If you wish to help, you should file a request for emergency relief from the New Republic. How long will that take? Says some random guy in the crowd. If they even accept the request, it will take a long time, and there's no way to expedite the process unless the Republic owes you a truly large favor. Din, at this, starts walking away. As he's helping Grogu into the N1, he notices that Grogu is wearing his armor and grumbles something about how he knew the kid could put it on himself. The N1 launches and jumps to hyperspace. Both Din and Grogu fall asleep on the trip. It would not be wrong to call this a plot contrivance. It is incredibly contrived. If I was doing another pass of this, I'd try to think of a way to get Din off the planet and into this mission without being so ridiculously like, oh yeah, a giant world-ending volcano just went off randomly with no warning. Like, yeah, okay, I know. However, this is good for a couple reasons. First, it acknowledges that Nevarro is a horrific volcanic planet with open lava everywhere. Like, this is not a nice place to live. And I think the show has completely forgotten about that. Like, yeah, this place has lava rivers. Obviously, there would be some sort of environmental hazards. It also gives Din a connection to this place. You know, Nevarro has existed as sort of Din's home for the first 3 seasons, and he's fully living there after the third season. So the time skip, whatever that is in the real movie, is how long Din's been living in Nevarro. It makes sense for him to have some connection to this community. So I think taking on this job that he doesn't want to take to help those people is cool, especially since we've turned Nevarro into this nice, happy town that we're supposed to care about. The New Republic military base for the Outer Rim. I have no thoughts about the design of this planet. It can look like whatever you want. Din and Ward negotiate terms. Ward can pull some strings and get Nevarro detoxed as soon as the volcano stops, along with a hefty payday for Din. She also offers to have Grogu looked after at the base, which Din refuses. He thinks Grogu will be safest with him. Ward argues that obviously Grogu would be safer here, but Din does not budge. So they, in the end, agree for the New Republic to provide a soldier to come along as a caretaker for Grogu when Din is busy. Now, with everything settled, Ward properly explains the plan. Din herself, along now with Grogu and the caretaker, will travel to Nar Shaddaa. Din and Ward will go to Rada's fighting pits with Din as the challenging bounty hunter and Ward as his patron. If Din wins the fight with Rada, both he and Ward will be taken deeper into Rada's lair and eventually moved to a new unguarded planet. Ward will smuggle in a distress beacon and use it to summon the New Republic, who will arrest Rada and the Imperials. If Din loses the fight with Rada but survives, they will regroup at the ship and move on to Plan B. Din asks what Plan B is, and Ward implies that they have another candidate for Rada to fight, but deflects, actually saying who it is. It's too bad that these two have an existing relationship in my story, because it would be kind of fun to hear what Din has to say of, like, what happens if you die. Partly for dark humor, but partly because I am curious of who Din would give custody of Grogu to, you know, like, in his will. Clearly he has one, right? Maybe Carl Weathers? IG-11, maybe? I think probably the best choice is Cara Dune, but, you know, obviously that's not going to happen in canon. Oh, God. If you want to know my thoughts on that, you can read the description, but I'm putting it all the way at the bottom. Ward gives Din unrestricted access to the equipment of the base and summons someone to be his guide to the base's repository. That someone is Zeb. Din already has armor, but he looks through the supply of weapons and grabs several, including that disintegration rifle he had at the beginning of the show and never used again. Once he's armed to the teeth, Zeb starts outlining the kind of ship Din will need. The N1 is too small for 4 people, especially if they want to bring back prisoners. Although, to be fair, the New Republic will probably bring their own ships. Din will need a ship that is large but also fast and combat capable, which would not look out of place on a crime world. Din says he has an idea. Hard cut to a ship of the same make and model as the Razor Crest. So my original plan was that the Razor Crest 2 is on loan, and that's the explanation for why Mando doesn't have it in the future, because I don't want him to have it in the future. You know, it was ballsy to blow up his main ship. It should be that way permanently. You know, he has a new ship. I don't like the N1, but you made a change to your show, and you gotta stick with it, at least for another season. However, I will say I am going to blow up the Razor Crest 2 later in this movie, so it doesn't have to be on loan. It can just be his new ship just for the movie, and then it blows up, and then he doesn't have it anymore. Oh, also Zeb. I have worked him into this movie. Is he super necessary? No. But as it turns out, having another Rebel character was helpful for, giving people to talk to. I did not write this into my script, but it's important that Zeb has a very, macho, fun, obnoxious attitude. He and Din can have, a dude bro friendship, especially because they're looking at weapons. So it's a great time to be like, yeah, this one really packs a punch. Stuff like that. And that is important because I want it to be a small surprise later when it turns out that Zeb is actually a really kind and gentle person. Damn it. I keep not reading ahead and thinking that this segment is done, but there is more to say. This would be a good time for Grogu shenanigans, but I'm not going to write it. I'm not. If you want it, you can insert it in there. Din and Ward get kitted out and ready to leave. Zeb shows up too, dressed in casual clothes and wearing a giant bag. Din says, "What are you doing?" And Zeb says, "She didn't tell you? I'm your babysitter." "Really? I didn't know that was within your skill set." And Zeb's like, "Nah, don't worry, I'm great with the kids." The ship lifts off and jumps to hyperspace. That is the end of Act 1. Welcome to our first intermission. Now, the 3 acts are not solidly placed. For pacing reasons, I think Act 1 is a little long and Act 3 is a little short. So in a real movie, you could either add stuff and subtract to even it out, or you could just arbitrarily move the goalposts. It doesn't matter. But for this intermission, I want to talk about a quick change that I thought would be really fun, but I decided not to do it. And that would be, what's the deal with Sigourney Weaver's character? My theory is that she was supposed to be Cara Dune, but then, Gina Carano happened, so they didn't do that. But this isn't Cara. This is a character who, no offense to Sigourney Weaver, is past her prime fighting age. This character's not getting in any fist fights, right? Plus, she's a leader. She's more of a, like a Thrawn type, like a Grand Moff Tarkin, but a good guy. Like Admiral Akbar. She's like Admiral Akbar. She makes decisions. She might be good at strategy. She might know her way around a blaster, but she's not here for the fight scenes. So I was thinking, we have a human woman who is that sort of character for the New Republic about 15 years before the start of the sequels. Why isn't this Holdo? I know Holdo's not a popular character, but, the sequels are coming up. We are about halfway between the originals and sequels. Not quite, but almost. And there are some of these characters that are introduced in the sequels as having fought in the Rebellion or the Empire, and then they don't ever show up in original trilogy places. Holdo existed clearly, so why isn't she in more things? This would be a good time to see Holdo in action. We could get the same sort of arc where she's kind of a weird hippie and Din writes her off and then it turns out she's really cool. I think it would be more fun to see her as incredibly competent from the start, so we could see what Leia was thinking when she hired her. I think that would play in pretty well, because the whole point of her character in episode 8 is that she is like a master strategist, but she doesn't seem that way, and that leads our main characters to assume that she's just incompetent. But no, she is competent. She's just keeping her cards close to the vest. Again, you don't have to like that story, but it would be cool to have Holdo. But I decided not to do that for a couple of reasons. First off, I have a bunch of returning characters. This is one of very few original characters for the movie, so I can't change it to another legacy character. That would just be way overkill. While in hyperspace, we get a quick scene to show that Zeb is, in fact, good with kids. He's really sweet and gentle, which surprises Din, who only saw his most obnoxious fun side earlier. The Razor Crest 2 emerges from hyperspace with all 4 of our crew in the cockpit. They approach Nar Shaddaa, but 2 ships flank them and hail the ship. Din picks up. "Gunship, you are not recognized as having been to Nar Shaddaa before. What is your business here?" Din chimes in. He says, "I'm a bounty hunter. I'm here for Rada's challenge." "Yeah, we've had lots of that lately. You're free to pass, although I should warn you." And says, "What?" And we get a beat. Ward whispers they're talking to each other over comms. And the Hutt goon just says, "Never mind, move along." The ship touches down on Nar Shaddaa and lands in some gross hangar. And Din and Ward set off, leaving Grogu and Zeb behind on the ship. They arrive at the building, where a front desk droid greets them from behind, the desk. Din says, "I'm a bounty hunter. This is my patron. We're here for Rada's challenge." The desk droid says, I do not have a voice. I'm just going to use my normal voice. I don't give a fuck. "I'm sorry, fights for the day haven't started yet, but I can mark you down for a spot in line for the round of fights starting at sundown." And Din says, "All right." And the front desk droid says, "The fighter's name?" And Din says, "The Mandalorian. We already have 2 Mandalorians who have passed Rada's challenge. Please choose something more descriptive." "What Mandalorians? Is Boba Fett one of them?" "I'm not at liberty to say. Your name, please." "Din Djarin." "Patron's name?" "Ward." "Would that be Lieutenant Skornica Ward of the New Republic by any chance?" Ward is taken aback. She says, "Would that be a problem?" And the dress droid says, No, we accept everyone. Will you be returning with a different warrior should Din Djarin lose his fight?" And Ward says yes. The dress droid says, Good, have a nice day." The 2 leave, heading back toward the ship. "Listen, about what you said back there." "Of course I have a backup plan. Do you think I'd gamble the fate of the galaxy on just one person?" Din's like, "No, I don't care about that. The mention of your real name. Never give up valuable information in Hutt space. Everything has a price, especially information like that." Ward says, "You're being paranoid." And Din grumbles something like, "We'll see, you guys don't understand." During this waiting time, Grogu starts fussing, and Din decides to take him out for a snack. Of course, he arms himself to the teeth first. Din and Grogu find some meat stand, where Grogu points at a big piece of food. Grogu is a carnivorous little monster, so I'm imagining some sort of meat, but it doesn't matter. Din buys it for him, but doesn't let him eat it yet. He wants to go back to the ship first because this place is dangerous. As they near the hangar, a massive explosion happens right where the ship is. The Razor Crest 2 has been blown up. Din says, "Oh my god, again? You gotta be kidding me." Immediately, he's shot in the head by a stormtrooper. He turns around and shoots them. But there are more troopers in various stages of uniform decay, emerging from hiding places with guns. And these are not the clean, professional stormtroopers of Moff Gideon. These troopers are dirty, their gear is damaged by old battles and natural wear. They are much more akin to Thrawn's troops in the Ahsoka show, or especially the Client's troopers in the first few episodes of Season 1. Din realizes he's outnumbered and starts running, Grogu in hand. Grogu holds onto the snack. I am not going to sit here and describe an action scene or the chase scene. I think that's the job for a director and not the writer. But here are some bullet points that are important to the story. Din steals a speeder bike and is chased through the city as he picks off his attackers. Din, at some point, does something impressive with his jetpack, like hopping over a bridge and then getting back on the speeder. But the bike is faster than the jetpack, so he does need to stay on it. Grogu does nothing in this scene except hold on to the snack, using the Force to catch it when he drops it. Like, he really wants that snack. The chase goes on for some time, and while Din is not in immediate danger, he cannot shake off his pursuers or kill all of them. Every time he thinks he's got most of them, more just emerge out of the woodwork. It is clear that this city is absolutely full of Imperials. Eventually, Din takes the speeder to a more desolate part of town. I'm imagining like a city outskirts, but Nar Shaddaa is a world city, so let's just say it's a flat concrete area with a rundown tower sticking out. That tower is important. Din approaches the tower and shots come out, but they don't kill him. They kill the people chasing him in a very impressive display of marksmanship. Din decides to approach and is called in by the tower's occupant. He ascends the tower with Grogu to find Fennec Shand. The top of the tower is serving as a very disheveled sniper's nest. Fennec is not looking good. She has circles under her eyes, her hair is messed up. It's clear that she's been here for a while and she has not slept. Fennec asks Din to take over watching for intruders, so he grabs her sniper and starts watching. Fennec lies down, clearly exhausted. She explains that she came here with Boba thinking that he would just talk with Rada and come back, only he didn't come back. When she went looking for him, she was attacked by Imperials. She escaped them until she was pinned here, but luckily this old hideout had a bunch of sniper rifles, so she was able to kill everyone in range. Now, nobody can get near her, but the imps are watching her 24/7, and they have snipers of their own, so she's trapped. She's been here for days, surviving off old rations that she could find in this hideout, but she's run out of food and she's starving. At the mention of this, Grogu offers her his snack, and she takes it eagerly. Or, alternatively, he doesn't give it to her, and earlier in the conversation, she just snatches it out of his hands. I chose that he gives it to her because, I wanted to give him a decision, and this is a kind thing to do, especially after we've set up how much he wanted that treat. But he gives it to this person in need because he's learning about kindness and charity. But it would also be really funny if we set up that Grogu really wanted this snack and then Fennec just snatches it away. Fennec is a good guy, but she's not a good person, right? She's definitely in the scoundrel type of Star Wars character. She would absolutely steal candy from a baby, and I think that's funny. I think I actually do prefer the Fennec steals Grogu's snack, because it also makes more sense because she's starving. But I do think it's probably better thematically if Grogu gives it to her. I really don't know. You know what? That's another thing you can comment about. Din says that the Empire is sending in as many of their own agents as possible, and they must be assassinating other parties before they can even get to Rada. The good news here is that when Rada leaves, the Empire should be able to leave the tower alone and they can escape. He starts getting comfortable, but Fennec says no, he needs to leave. If it's just her, the Empire will only spend so many resources, but if the tower has 2 high-priority targets, they'll throw everything they have at it. And, just as she says this, we hear that roar of TIE fighters in the distance. Fennec says, yeah, Din, you need to get out of here. You can draw them off, and then they won't waste their resources on either of us individually. Now, I'd like a point here where she offers to take Grogu, since Din's run is going to be pretty dangerous. And she's probably right. Let's say she makes some good points, and Din refuses. No, he has to be with me. That's where he's safe. Din asks Fennec, where should I go? And Fennec says, I think you only have one option. And we don't see the end of that conversation. Instead, we get a view from a TIE pilot approaching the tower. Let's say there's a squad of a couple of them, but we're going to arbitrarily choose one of them to be our protagonist for this scene. A speeder launches out of the tower at incredibly high speeds. It's Din escaping. The TIE pilot hears a radio come on. It's their captain or whatever. And he says, focus on the Mandalorian. He's a primary target. The Hutt ships will be on us in 2 minutes, so we don't have time to focus on both of them. So this is obviously just here to fix a plot hole. Why don't the Empire just send in TIE fighters to blow up the tower? Well, because the Hutt cops will be on them, and they've only got a couple TIE fighters, and they can only use them once. However, I kind of like this as world building for Nar Shaddaa. There's pretty much no security on the ground level. You can have shootouts in the streets, and, the Hutt police don't really do anything. But you can't take it to the air. Once you bring spaceships or airships into this, the Hutt police are on your ass. I think that's a decent compromise, because we want the Hutt police to be kind of lawless, so the Hutt police have to have a limited presence, but they also need to be powerful because, you don't mess with the Hutts. So I think that's the unofficial rule, is you can have shootouts in the streets, but not dogfights. Then we get another chase, a shorter one, of Mando ducking the TIEs and other Imperials in the city. The TIEs get attacked by the Hutt ships and they're destroyed, but there's still all those Imperials to deal with. I have no vision for how this chase will go specifically, but I want it to end with Din destructively crashing his vehicle into the office of Rada's fighting pits and using the momentum to basically launch himself into the front desk, kind of like that GTA video with the blimp. The droid barely looks up. "Hello, Din Djarin. Your patron is not here. Are you choosing to descend without a patron?" And Din says, "Change of plans. This is my patron." And he holds up Grogu. Alright, patron's name? IG-11. The desk droid just says, "Fair enough. Welcome aboard, IG-11. You may both enter through that lift." Din and Grogu both enter the elevator, which takes them down. Din says, "Grogu, we're going to be separated. It's going to be scary for both of us, but you stay safe. Remember what I taught you. Keep your armor on and wait for me to come find you." And Grogu coos in understanding. The elevator opens, and Din's weapons are stripped from him and placed in a bin. This takes some time, naturally, because he's so armed. He is then shoved toward the entrance of the arena. Grogu is escorted separately to a viewing area. Rada says, "Oh, our first contender of the day. And I hear yet another Mandalorian. Show yourself, fighter." Din steps out into the arena. An announcer reiterates the rules that, they're not allowed to use guns. And they fight. It is over pretty quick. Rada is strong and fast, but Din's jetpack and flamethrower and his grapple gun, if he has one, are all within the bounds of the rules. Rada concedes, and Din is escorted away by the guards. Grogu is also escorted away by the guards. He is taken to a beautiful hotel-style room with snacks and amenities. Like a nice hotel. I know Star Wars and Disney people don't really know what that is, because the Star Wars hotel was like a torture chamber. I honestly don't know, like, if that's common ball reference or if this is a really niche thing that nobody knows about. The Galactic Star Cruiser. Look up Jenny Nicholson's video. It is one of my favorite YouTube videos of all time. Maybe during Din's stuff, we can cut to him jumping on the bed or otherwise enjoying himself. Din, on the other hand, is taken to a dingy barracks where all the bunks are in the same room. There's a viewing area to the arena, but the room is full of bounty hunters. Din looks around, and we get a quick shot of each bounty hunter there except Boba, settling on an armored female Mandalorian. "Din Djarin, my, have you grown. You, what are you doing here?" "Winning this little competition. My patron has offered me one of the Hutt-controlled planets, along with a sizable amount of credits, which I will use to make a new home for my order." Din says, "Our people are on Mandalore now, consorting with those false Mandalorians, like that pretender Kryze. They all take their helmets off, did you know?" "Yeah, I heard." "I've been away from the clan for too long. I must return and make them see sense. These horrible pretenders must be left behind, even if it means abandoning Mandalore. I will leave you to settle in, but we will be speaking again." At this point, Boba Fett comes over. "Hello, Mandalorian. My name is Boba Fett. Say, that's a nice helmet you have there. Do you mind if I have a look at it?" And Din is obviously confused because he's met Boba Fett before, so he's just like, "Sure, yeah, as long as it stays on." Boba rubs his hand around the sides of Din's helmet, seemingly inspecting. The audience hears Boba's voice come in, but now it has the crackle of radio communication. Boba says, "The antenna that I have installed on your helmet will allow us to speak without the others hearing. Do you copy?" And Din says, "Yes, I hear you. Why did you pretend that we've never met?" And Boba says, "The others here remember my reputation. None of them know that I've gone soft, as they would see it." "I see." So now we get some exposition from both sides, from Din about who this woman is, and from Boba about the state of things here. Let's start with what Din has to say. Din would be cagey about this to Boba, but he's going to talk to her later, so we can leave some gaps and fill them in later. But I'm going to lay out all of the information here. The woman has a name, but she is referred to as simply the Hunter, like how the Armorer isn't named. She used to do bounty hunting to support the Children of the Watch and mentored Din in the practice. We actually know that Din had a teacher who he went on adventures with in the past, comparable to his relationship with Grogu. I don't know if Disney has a plan for this plot thread, but in my version, this is that character. So their relationship is very personal. But it would also work if, you didn't do this. She could just be random, who knows Din, but isn't like his former teacher. Anyway, the hunter left the Children of the Watch at some point before season 1, and I would either just leave it ambiguous or invent a petty minor disagreement that the hunter left over. Or she's just been busy, who cares? If you're wondering why this character is a woman, first of all, what? But there is actually a reason other than keeping up the ratio. Not that the ratio is a non-valid reason to make characters female. We have more male characters than female characters in this movie. There are a lot of really cool women in The Mandalorian who just did not fit in this movie for various reasons, and a lot of male characters who I did include because they were in the trailers, or like Boba Fett, they just made sense. So, this movie needed a woman or two. But also, this character is sort of supposed to represent the Armorer, since the Armorer is like the representative of the clan. What she says goes. So if Din is scared about the Children of the Watch accepting him, she is the personification of who would accept or not accept her. So making this hunter character similar to the Armorer, like visually, I think is cool. That is why you'll notice her design is literally just the Armorer recolored and with some feathers. As for the actress, I'm not big on fan casting, but I do want this character to be on the older side. So, just pick your favorite 80s or 90s female action hero that hasn't been in Star Wars. Linda Hamilton is pretty good. She was in that horrible season of Stranger Things, and her character was really stupid, but her acting was good. It's the kind of hammy evil that is necessary for this character. Now, we're not going to see her face, so you don't actually need to waste like a good actress on this, or not. You just do a voice actress and then have some random person who's not famous do the body work. But yeah, if you really wanted an actress, that's my pick, Linda Hamilton. Now, what do we learn from Boba? As always, the numbers are flexible, but let's say there are 10 bounty hunters that have made it so far, and 4 of them are under contract from the Imperial Remnant, including Din's old friend, the Hunter. Their contract states that only one of them needs to win for all of them to receive the rewards, so their plan is to team up and wait until only they remain, then all but one of them will yield. The bounty hunters have no idea what the second phase of Rada's challenge is, except that they will all be on an uninhabited planet, which Din already knew from Ward's intel. While Din and Boba are talking, every once in a while a fighter comes in and gets just absolutely blown away by Rada. These are in-universe, nameless hopefuls that no one thinks that are going to win, so there's not a lot of fanfare. But suddenly, the crowd erupts. Rada yells out, "Oh, you hear that, imps? You failed! You let one through!" Team Imperial all rushes to their feet and comes to the little window. "I repeat, the next challenger is a representative of the New Republic, Garazeb Aurelios, supported by Colonel Ward of the New Republic." The crowd has its usual cheers and mindless screaming, but with some booing mixed in. Boba turns on his radio again. "Do you know who this is?" Din says, "Yeah, I think I do." Zeb walks into the arena, wielding his bow rifle, which we have not seen before, at least in this movie. Some sort of referee droid, or maybe the same person as the announcer, says a stern word about how he's been allowed his weapon, but he's not allowed to use the blaster functionality for the fight. You could go a couple ways with how Rada feels. He could feel disdain for the New Republic, or I like that he recognizes Zeb as a Lasat and comments about how you don't see his kind anymore and what great warriors how they are, and he's excited to fight one. They fight, and Rada is clearly winning. Zeb is strong and fast and can tank a lot of blows, but he's not able to land a good hit. By the way, if you were wondering why I had both Din and Boba not really struggle against Rada, it does kind of make for worse action scenes if both of them are pretty much handling Rada. This is why I wanted it to be a visible difference. Boba and Mando can easily take this guy down, but Zeb cannot. He is a worse fighter than Din. That's why Ward wanted Din here. She was like, maybe Zeb could do it. He's a backup plan, if we get no one else, then we can throw Zeb in there and see what he's got. But It's not a guarantee. We have been seeing Din watch the fight, but now we switch to Grogu watching it, since his room has an observation deck where he can watch. Now, Grogu likes Zeb and obviously doesn't want him to die. So, at a pivotal moment, Rada knocks the bow rifle out of Zeb's hand, and Zeb goes scrambling for it. Rada has his axe, and he's going in for the kill, and Zeb's reaching, but the bow rifle is just out of reach, and at this point, Grogu uses the Force to push the weapon into Zeb's hands. Not enough that anyone, even necessarily Zeb, would realize what just happened, but Zeb blocks the blow and his life is saved. Zeb redoubles his conviction and wins the fight, zapping Rada with the bow rifle before he gets tased by security guards and thrown unconscious in with Din and the hunters. One of the hunters working for the Empire that is not the hunter or Bossk tries to take a cheap shot at him, but they're stopped by the droid stationed in the room. So, now, Zeb is here, but he's unconscious, and even when he wakes up, there's not much to talk about. So before anything else happens in the plot, I think it's important to spend some time with some not plot-heavy scenes just to establish our cast of characters. I'm not going to write out the dialogue, but I know I want the relationships to be very clearly defined, and I know what I want them to be. The bounty hunters are going to sit around chatting until dinner, which will be intercut with a dinner held by Rada for all the patrons, which will be our first introduction to the patrons. So that means the bounty hunters will be introduced first and the patrons second. However, for structural reasons, I think it's easier to talk about the patrons first. So just keep in mind, this isn't the order that they would be introduced in the actual movie. At the fancy dinner, we have 10 patrons and Rada, who is absolutely loving the attention he's getting, both positive and negative. There are 4 Imperial warlords. They can be background characters from the Shadow Council or new people. It doesn't matter. They are flattering Rada at every turn, clearly trying to get an advantage in the challenge. There are other Hutts, the twins and a new placeholder character, and the other Hutts are obviously pissed at Rada. One of the Pikes is there, since we know that they're still a big power at this point in the story from Book of Boba Fett. Let's say that this character sees everything as a big joke and laughs at both the Imperials' desperation and the Hutt's anger. Ward, who remember is here as Zeb's patron, is doing her best to keep a low profile and keep Grogu safe. She is subject to needling from the Imperials, but they can't actually do anything to her with the guard droids everywhere. So, if your woke meter is going off, you may notice this is like 4 evil men harassing a woman. If you don't like the optics of that, we can just make one of the Imperials a woman. It's okay. I think it's okay because it is supposed to be an uncomfortable dynamic. These Imperials are not good people. They are making this character uncomfortable. So I would keep it, but I understand why you wouldn't. I want this lavish dinner of scheming and politicking to be intercut with the bounty hunters dinner, which is just some cheap crap that they all eat silently. Speaking of which, let's talk about how the bounty hunters interact. Team Imperial is obviously working together and have the same priorities, but they don't really like each other. Bossk thinks he and Boba are the only real bounty hunters here, and everyone else is useless cannon fodder. This annoys everybody, but especially the Imperials who are supposed to be on the same team as him. The Hunter is not subtle about her beliefs, and she's always talking about the way and Mandalorian customs. We know what she's talking about, but most of the bounty hunters, including those in her own camp, think she's just saying crypty, judgy, religious mumbo-jumbo. Imagine a guy who just sits in the back and says you're going to hell and refuses to elaborate. It would get pretty annoying pretty fast. That's what people are dealing with the Hunter. The other members of Team Imperial are nobodies. However, if I was doing a full script with multiple drafts, I would give each of them a single personality trait or some simple setup and payoff, but I'm not doing that. For my visuals, I've grouped these Hunters mostly arbitrarily, but I have included this character, Bazine Netal. Should I put her on screen? That's going to make editing me really annoyed. Anyway, she's on Team Empire because her character is working for the First Order in the sequels. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, this is a character who doesn't have any known melee combat skills, and in canon, in 14 ABY, wouldn't she be 16 how the fuck did she beat Rada? And my answer is, I don't know, man. 4 of the other bounty hunters work for various criminals. It would be logical for them to work together against the Imperials, but they're not doing that, except for a duo of 2 characters whose design should reflect that they work together, and Boba can tell us that these 2 work for the twins. Boba himself is cozying up to the Imperial crowd, falling back into the kind of cruel bounty hunter type of talk that he was before. But he's also making it clear to Din in their secret communications that he is not enjoying this. He regrets the life that he's pretending to go back to, and he's only doing this to give both him and sort of Din as well their best chance to survive. Finally, Din is opposed to the Empire, and he is not afraid to say it. He helps Zeb get back on his feet, and the 2 form Team Good Guy. The Hunter, despite being on opposite sides as Din, keeps talking to him. Eventually, she gets him to go into some sort of closet or gym room with her that's separate from the main barracks, and they have a conversation. She tells him that it's been a long time since she saw another true Mandalorian, not one of Bo-Katan's pretenders, and she wants to do the rights. I don't remember, and I didn't bother to check if there's an actual name for this process where Din sits down in front of the armorer and she asks him the "did you take off your helmet" questions. I don't think that there is a name for that, but I could just be forgetting. So if there is, my bad. But if it doesn't have the name, I'm giving it one. The rights. That's what it's called now. Din is uncomfortable, but acquiesces. He asks the Hunter if she's ever removed her helmet or if it's ever been removed, and the Hunter says no to both, with a special point of pride for that second one. Maybe she mentions a close call with somebody that almost took off her helmet and she murdered them in some horrible fashion. When they're done, the Hunter offers to do the same rites for Din, and he politely refuses. The Hunter becomes cold and reveals that she knows he was an apostate, accuses him of going soft because of that child of his. Now Din is the cold one, and from then on their relationship becomes distant. Okay, this is a big one, so I'm going to be consulting my notes. Let's talk about theme. Din's arc is about taking off his helmet. That is something that I had decided on before I knew what the story was. He has been taking off his helmet, and he's nervous about what his people will think. Now, since this is Disney, his people are not going to shun him again. I have a scene at the end of the movie, which I think is very touching, where he meets up with the armorer and she says that it's okay. But before we get to that point, we need to have some drama. So I am creating the Hunter as this fanatic who represents all of Din's worst fears about what will happen if he goes back and asks his people for forgiveness, because she does not like it. She thinks it's terrible. This way we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, where his actual people are broadly supportive, but we do get to see what it would look like if the Children of the Watch did not respect him or forgive him, and we get to see how Din feels and reacts to that. We can also make a point here. In my version, the Hunter is his old teacher, so she's an authority figure for him, kind of a parental figure, and so is the armorer in the way. So if one of them accepts him and one of them doesn't, then who cares what the Hunter thinks, Screw her anyway. We have a better person who is more understanding. So in this writing, I've accidentally created a theme. When something about you has changed and you don't think that your family is going to accept you, what do you do when you go back to them? And I would say that my answer to this question, the theme of the story, is that change is natural and you shouldn't be ashamed of it, and your family should accept you, and if they don't, screw them. And we are going to reinforce this theme with what we're doing with Boba. Since, Bossk is not his family, but he is an old friend, and bounty hunting basically is the family that he's left. Boba is going to explore a different aspect, which is, what if you pretend to fit in? This is like going home to your parents and going to church with them if you don't do that at your own place. Pretending to be someone you're not to appease people. And, to an extent, this is something that in real life you should do to a point. But if you're gay and you're lying to your family about that, eventually this becomes untenable. And that's what we're going to explore with Boba. I'm not a professional writer, and I don't have a lot of experience with this sort of thing because my parents are great. And also, I'm not different from them very much. And it's a first draft as well. So, obviously in a real story, I would write this with more sensitivity and like talk to more people and do more research. My version of this is very vibes based, which I think is not too bad for a children's story about, space where none of the, like, it's not a real world situation. The lifestyle changes are taking off a magic techno helmet and leaving a life of bounty hunting. So, yeah. Oh, and on this point, maybe I should save this for an intermission, but whatever. I really wanted to make Callus Zeb's patron, because Callus, if you don't know, is a character from Rebels who was an Imperial who defected to the Rebels. Sorry, spoilers. And if he was a patron, then he would have to hang out with the Imperials. He would be like in Ward's place, and he might pretend to be an Imperial, and that would be really interesting. But this is kind of the same thing we're doing with Boba, and you'd have to pretty much write Ward out of the story, maybe replace her entirely, and that just seemed like not necessary. So that was one of those darlings that you have to kill. Oh, and also, Grogu sort of fits into this theme, right? Because he used to be, a youngling Jedi, and then he got picked up by Luke, and Luke wanted to bring him back into the fold to be a Jedi again, and Grogu refused. He chose to be a Mandalorian instead of a Jedi. Now, Grogu can't talk, so there's not much we can do with this, but I would like to add some faint echoes where it's like, yeah, Grogu's kind of in the similar situation, but not really. However, these scenes end up being stitched together. They all culminate in both dinners being interrupted by an alarm. The droids are scattering. Rada receives word from a panicked front desk droid who says, I tried to tell him to come back tomorrow, but he refused to listen to sense. He says he wants to fight now. I didn't even get the patron's name. Rada is intrigued and orders the guards to stand down. He gets his gear and comes out. Out of the shadows comes Embo, carrying a small masked figure with him. The bounty hunters, who have gathered by the viewing platform, all start whispering about him. Mando asks Boba who this guy is, and Boba explains that he's a legend from the Clone Wars. He refused to take jobs from the Empire because of some crime they did to his homeworld, so he fell from the public eye for a while. But everyone thought he was dead since he was last seen in the employ of the Hutts when the crisis began. The crisis Din alluded to in Act 1, which even the most hardened bounty hunter steered clear of, Embo was there for the entire thing. The patron speaks in a garbled, scrambled voice. This is my hunter. Embo puts the patron down and tosses his bowcaster at one of the security droids. Rada is excited, says something about what an honor it is to have the great Embo in his building. He asks for the patron's identity, and the patron refuses to answer. The fight between Embo and Rada is short and simple. Embo is too fast and acrobatic for Rada to land a hit, and he just keeps hitting the hut with his hat until Rada yields. So I think that pretty much explains what Embo is, but I want to go over a couple decisions I made. First off, in the visuals, I've made him like a cryptid, which I think really is fun. I that is kind of what I was going for in writing him. He's this silent, mysterious, monstrous figure who everyone's scared of. I think that's a really interesting way to go with this character, and I think the visuals reflect that. But also, this is a shot from the trailer. Like, I did not darken this image. He's just backlit in the shot. I mean, I made his eyes glow, but, it was kind of convenient. Also, when I watched the Clone Wars, I always thought that Embo was speaking Huttese, but he's not. He's speaking the language of his own planet. So, like, why does anyone understand him? Is Kyozo, like, a popular language? That doesn't make any sense. So, in my version, the only person that understands his language is his patron. Oh, and speaking of retcons, those of you who are into the lore might think that this is a retcon for Embo's history, but the Hutt thing is just a rumor. Now, I will say, I originally intended for it to be true, and I do want it to be sort of true. Like, Embo's whereabouts are not always accounted for, so he could have participated in some of the Hutt crisis, but the stuff that was going on with Embo in canon is also true now. That was really convenient for me because I forgot to look up what Embo had been up to because I didn't think that the movie would contradict the canon, but it totally did. Embo should not be in the Mandalorian movie unless the movie ends up doing exactly the same thing that I do with Embo at the end, which they might, we'll see. To that point of synergy with the canon, there's no dog. I'm sorry, the dog that he has in the Clone Wars is canonically dead by this point in the canon. The movie actually reckoned with that. This is canonically a new dog, but I think that's a cheap cop-out. And I would do it if there was really room for a dog, but it's actually really inconvenient to include the dog. I included it in originally, and just before I started recording, I was looking up Embo and realizing all this stuff about the canon. I was like, wait a minute, his dog is dead? This is great. God, that's terrible. Don't take that out of context. This is great. I can just write his dog out. Like, I had multiple scenes like justifying the dog's existence because it didn't make sense at all, and it's gone. It's beautiful. I'm so glad that dog is dead. Embo enters the bounty hunter area, where he just lurks in a corner and refuses to talk to anybody. Likewise, the patron walks into the dinner that Rada is holding, where Grogu and Ward are, and has a similar mystique, but with two differences. First, Embo is actually intimidating, whereas the patron, while mysterious, is 3 feet tall and has no reputation. The crime lords in the room are curious but not scared, like the bounty hunters are of Embo. Second, the patron seems weirdly fascinated with Grogu. They look a little too long at him, enough that Ward takes notice. It's hard to tell what the look was for since the patron is wearing a mask. By the way, the actual mask should not look like the visual I'm using. That's just, I just needed something. In fact, I would like the mask to sort of flare at the ends. Maybe there's some sort of crest on it. It's unclear. Because this is a smaller character, so I think it would be fun to sort of imply that this is a character of Yoda's species. It's not, but that would be a fun red herring. Shortly thereafter, Rada announces that he has all the bounty hunters he needs, and he will be moving on to Phase 2 shortly. He seems a little bit rushed, and it's not clear if he was always planning on cutting Phase 1 short suddenly, or if something about Embo's arrival made him excited to move on. I'd prefer to keep it ambiguous, but if we want to imply a reason, I think it should be because the surrounding city is getting absolutely torn apart between the Imperial gatekeeping and whatever rampage happened for Embo to get in, and whatever Hutt forces are active in Nar Shaddaa are pressuring Rada to get out of here and stop the madness. Rada leads the patrons into a luxury ship. The bounty hunters are also led in through a different entrance to a less nice part of the ship. Rada's ship lifts off, and we see a shot of Fennec from her tower watching it go. The hyperspace journey is uneventful, but we should probably throw in a scene or two to simulate the time passing, so this can be another time to establish any of those dynamics I mentioned earlier. Among these scenes, I want one in the patron's lounge where Grogu is unattended for a moment, and the patron picks him up and looks at him closely. Ward notices and comes back and snatches him back. "What are you doing?" The patron says, "Quite the unique species. I used to know one of his kind. Very powerful." And Ward just says, "That's none of your business." Then, in either the same scene or probably a different one, Rada summons all of the patrons to a large observation deck. He announces that they will be dropping out of hyperspace soon. Then he has the guards search all of the patrons for communication devices. We can have some slapstick about one of the droids trying to frisk Grogu, but he's a literal baby, so it doesn't really work. The Imperials, Ward, and the twins are all caught with comlinks, which the droids smash underfoot. Only then does the ship drop out of hyperspace, revealing an ocean planet. The ship moves into low orbit, and Rada uses magnification screens to reveal an island. He announces that this will be the theater where the champion is decided. The design of the island can be whatever you want. I think it should be Earth-like so that you could film on location, but this is also a chance to do some fun sci-fi stuff. Like, you have the trees be giant flowers, or giant tentacle monster, or like rock things, like those things that always show up in Avatar. There do need to be tree-like things, because I have several scenes where someone like emerges from the trees, but it could be more alien than I'm describing it. What follows is a montage of the hunters being given weapons and a few provisions, along with a little wristwatch each so Rada can track their location and vitals. Bossk organizes all the Imperials and Boba into a huddle. The partners who are working for the twins are clearly strategizing. Zeb and Din do as well, and this is the only one we see. Din gives Zeb some sort of bounty hunter beacon so they can find each other. Rada announces that the bounty hunters will remain on the island until all but one of them have either died or yielded. Each bounty hunter is loaded into basically a Helldiver pod and dropped from orbit onto the island. Once the bounty hunters are gone, Rada laughs and tells the other patrons that they're in for a big surprise. This planet is an old secret from my father. Everybody thought it was just an ocean planet, but Jabba knew about the single island. He used to use it for smuggling, so I know that once a year, the amphibious sea creatures come to the island to breed. So, this is another intermission, sort of. We're at what I would tentatively call the midpoint, but there are a couple parts in the story that you could call the midpoint, especially if you move the goalpost between Acts 2 and 3. This is where my intermission is going to be. A couple things to talk about that just happened. First off, I forgot to mention, but I want the hunter to have whistling birds. You remember those things where they're on Mando's wrist and he can shoot them and they all go in different directions and hit people and kill them? The hunter has those. They are very important for the finale, so we draw attention to them now. This would be a fun moment to be like, oh, Din, I would have given you some of these, but I'm not anymore because you're an apostate, or there's character work to do there. My main source for the way that screenwriting works is Mando v Movies. In some of his older videos, he has some rewrites where he is pretty much doing what I'm doing. Like I am fully just ripping his shit. But he said that he's not doing rewrites anymore, so I'm picking up the torch. Anyway, he really likes midpoints. He thinks that they should be like a full turning point in the story. And I have two things that can be considered a midpoint. I have this, which is the change in location, a change from relative safety for the bounty hunters into danger. I have another scene where something else dramatically changes, probably more so than this one, because this is planned and that is not planned. But I don't know. So I have two midpoints. Let's see, what else do we have? Yes, okay, my actual intermission conversation is about bounty hunters. The ones I want that are important to the story are Din Djarin, Boba Fett, Bossk, and Zeb. Not that Zeb is a bounty hunter, but you know, literally all of the other bounty hunters are unimportant and you could switch them out for someone else and it wouldn't matter. I have specifically chosen not to give them any personality, and I gave a couple pieces of dialogue and moments to some people on Team Imperial because I had to, but you know, I really don't want to establish character because I think that in your own head canon, you should just pick your favorite 8 bounty hunter, or is it 7? I don't know. Your favorite group of bounty hunters and just use those. You know, whatever Lego characters you have, you know, just line those up and those are your group. However, that's not to say that I chose at random. You know, I like my choices, and in particular, there are a lot of bounty hunters that I considered and did not choose. So almost any bounty hunter you can think of, I thought about them, I thought about including them, and I chose not to, and I had a reason for it. So, you know, comment, Jeremy, why did you not include blank or a saying or whatever? And I promise I will reply with my reason. Sometimes my reason will be good, or a saying is canonically dead. She got pushed off a cliff by Tobias Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson. Or maybe my answer will be stupid. Sorry, I forgot that character existed. But I will respond. So, you know, I have my reasons. I'm not going to justify my choices. You know what? You know, we're in the intermission. Let's do it. Let's see. Let me find a list of them. Okay, Twazi. She is a survivor of the box, which is a key inspiration to the story's premise. She is unaccounted for as of this point in the story. Also, she got her hand cut off, and I thought, you know, it would be fun to show her with a metal hand. And she's an acrobat, so we don't actually know about her being a huge melee fighter, but she has the physical... There is a baseline to think that she could be a melee fighter, especially since it's been 20 years. It's been like 35 years since we last saw her. And she's an alien, so she could have not aged since then. The Rhodian twins. These are placeholders. They need to be two characters that are working for the twins, so I want them to be very obviously partners, and there are no bounty hunters that I could think of that are like dynamic duo type things, except Zuckuss and Forlom, but for various reasons, I don't want those two in my but for various reasons, I don't want those two in my roster. IG-44 is my name for the blue IG unit. IG units are fun. Also, if you've watched The Mandalorian, you already know their skill set, so we don't have to devote any time to figuring out what this guy can do, or this thing, this it. Could be a girl, not important. I want it to be a new IG unit, not IG-88, even though I think IG-88 is alive. Like, IG-88 was blown up, but I think someone might have stitched it back together. I want this to be a new IG unit because IG units are fun, and I want this one to be blue because it should be new and interesting. I included a droid from the Haxian Brood. I had run out, and I needed just someone to fill the last spot, and I like Jedi Fallen Order. I replayed it recently, so it was on the mind. So yeah, that's the entire reason. Bazine Netal. Okay, so I think that if we're including all of these characters that appeared before this point in the story, it only makes sense to include at least one from the sequels. I chose Bazine Netal because I wanted her to be on a Team Imperial because she worked for the First Order, and it just makes sense. She is canonically 16 in 14 ABY, but she canonically was active at this time, I think. I read the Wikipedia, and it said that she did her first job at like 14. So, it's technically possible. I don't have an explanation for how she got past Rada, but I think she's also helpful because she is a spunky, sassy teenage girl, which is an archetype that our audience will be familiar with. So you don't have to spend too much time to establish a character. We can just be like, yeah, she's a teenage girl who is sassy. And the audience will be like, oh, yeah, I kind of get the gist. That's good. We need, for these bounty hunters, very simple ways to establish character in a very short amount of time. So that's something you could do with a young Bazine. There are other bounty hunters you could choose. There aren't a lot of bounty hunters that appear in the sequels. There's the guy who killed Rey's parents, but that's a lot of baggage. I feel like that's a lot for a Mandalorian movie. Yeah, we just have the... It's like if you had a Superman movie and Joe Chill, the guy who murdered Batman's parents, was just like part of it in a totally like random role that had nothing to do with the fact that he did that shit. Like it would be distracting. I think that's all of them. Din's pod lands in a field, and he comes out and gets his bearings. He gets out the tracker for Zeb and starts following it. Almost immediately, he runs into a giant frog. They look at each other for a few beats, and then the frog tries to kill Din, and Din shoots it dead. He moves on. These monsters don't have to be giant frogs. I, again, like Jedi Fallen Order, and there are frogs in that. Also, these are supposed to be amphibians because my backstory that I wrote for them is that there's an ocean. But if you wanted a different monster design, you could just change the planet to, have that. You could have, black lava salamanders, and you could just say that the island is surrounded by a lake of lava, or it's a lava planet with a single island. There is another kind of stupid reason that I want it to be frogs, which I will talk about later. But that is... oh my god, that's a terrible reason. If these ones didn't convince you, that one definitely won't. From here we get a montage of Din walking through some quaint forests and shooting the occasional frog monster. This is intercut with Grogu and Ward watching worriedly and other patrons drinking expensive space champagne. Let's say one of the hunters hired by a crime syndicate dies immediately, and we see the update on Rada's screen, and that brings us down to 11 hunters. Finally, Din finds Zeb. They fist bump or whatever, and have a nice conversation, and it seems like things are looking up for them. Din tells Zeb about his secret communications with Boba, and says he thinks Boba is on their side, but Zeb has his doubts. Speaking of, this is a good time to check in with Boba. We don't see his journey, but he can be covered in green blood or something to show that he's been in the fight. He arrives at a camp forming of the Imperial team, something like this. "Don't shoot, it's only me." "Boba, that just leaves 2 more. What did I say? Find the northern coastline and travel east. A genius plan, if I say so myself." Back to Zeb and Din. looking up at the Hutt ship, which is far away but still distinguishable. Zeb says, this is taking too long. The Republic should be here by now. Din says, if they're coming at all. What's that supposed to mean? You and Ward are good people, but you underestimated the Hutts. I don't know how Ward was planning on contacting her people, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rada figured it out and put a stop to it. Maybe, but they could still be on their way. I know, and hopefully they are, but we should plan for the worst. I don't know if this is a good segue into the next scene or if it needs a filler scene of Grogu to lead into it because it's going to be from his perspective, but either way, here it is. An Imperial Star Destroyer emerges from hyperspace. Rada is outraged and accuses the Imperials of cheating. All of them deny having summoned it. The destroyer hails Rada's ship, and the face of Grand Admiral Thrawn appears. Ward is terrified, Rada is excited, and all the Imperials start groveling. So it's you four that have caused the war effort so much. I have 2 Imperials that I want to have speaking roles, and I'm calling them Imp 1 and Imp 2. So this is Imp 1 talking. Grand Admiral, we have a plan to bring a great bounty to the war. Your inability to grasp my plan continues to amaze me, Admiral. We do not need credits or planets. We need numbers. Like the hundreds of stormtroopers under your collective command who have died on Nar Shaddaa for your ridiculous scheme carried out without my permission. It's not our fault you didn't understand how significant this was. It is short-sighted conniving like this that prevented the Empire from reaching its full potential in the past. Under my direction, waste like you will be cut out. Rada chimes in. If I may say something. You may not, Hutt. My empire will rise without a few useless worlds, and none of you have a place in it. The hologram cuts out, and the Star Destroyer opens fire on the ship. Rada's ship is big and shielded and armed to the teeth with weapons, so there's going to be a decent fight between the 2 flagships. Inside, there is a panic. The people realize that the Pike is missing, and one of the escape pods has launched, which causes 2 things. First, the Imperials put together that the Pike had a communication device that he snuck past notice, and he used it to call Thrawn's empire, selling out the Imperials in exchange for money. We can imply that the Pike took the escape pod to the Star Destroyer somehow, and we're not going to see him again. Also, the mention of escape pods leads to a mad rush on them. Rada gets in one, and we can see the twins trying to get into one together and not fitting. Ward takes Grogu to one, and the patron tries to get in with them, but Ward, presses the elevator closed door button and gets out just in time without the patron. On the ground, Din and Zeb can't tell what's happening specifically, but it's clear there's a Star Destroyer and it's attacking the ship. Din is really upset and worried because Grogu is on that ship. Then the ship explodes and the Star Destroyer jumps to hyperspace. Din is screaming. He is distraught. He pulls off his helmet and throws it away and just breaks down crying. Zeb wordlessly comforts him. Eventually, Din says, in a sort of daze, "You're not supposed to see me without my helmet." And Zeb doesn't even know about this. He's like, "Come on, what are you talking about? My people, we have a creed. Once we take the oath, we can never take off our helmets in front of a living thing. If we do, we're banished. I was forgiven once before, but I left my people and started taking off my helmet for him to be a better parent, and now they won't take me back either. I have no one. I'm a clan of one now." And Zeb thinks for a moment and says, I knew a Mandalorian. You remind me of her. She left her family and didn't think they would ever accept her back. And some didn't, but others did. That's the thing, Din. I've met good Mandalorians, cruel Mandalorians, ones that served the Empire, and ones that served only themselves. They're just people. And if they're really your family, they'll accept you no matter what. Din feels a little better from that, but obviously he's still distraught about Grogu. Then we see an escape pod crash a few miles off. Din is already up. He's got the helmet on. He's sprinting, using his jetpack to get there as fast as possible. Once he does, he's disappointed to see it's not Grogu in there. It's just an Imperial warlord, who we're calling Imp 2. Din sticks a gun in his face and starts asking questions, but he's practically incoherent. Zeb catches up and starts questioning the guy properly. What happened with that Star Destroyer? It was Thrawn. He was angry that we went behind his back, so he destroyed Rada's ship. I really like this idea that the Imperial still doesn't understand what he did wrong. Like, he thinks Thrawn is just mad because they went behind his back, and not that this idea was asinine and counter to Thrawn's plans. But speaking of Thrawn, this is what I'm doing with him. I'm saying that the Imperials in this movie went behind his back and are acting without his permission. Thrawn appears once, and it is to shoot everyone and leave. He does not take any L's in this, which is good. You could also have the Star Destroyer not be Thrawn. It could just be a proxy working for Thrawn, and they could say something to the same effect. But people like Thrawn. It's better for the fan service if he appears in person. Also, we don't see the inside of the Star Destroyer. Thrawn could be like a million miles away, just like using the Star Destroyer as a relay. You could do that if you. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And the kid? Did you see if he escapes? I think I saw that rebel colonel get into a pod with him. Din relaxes a little, but now he's stressed that Grogu is all alone and undefended. Zeb keeps questioning. What about the other imps and Rada? I know Rada got out, and I think I saw another warlord leave. Will all the escape pods be around here? No, they had flight controls. Mine were fried by the explosion, but if Rada could pilot his, he would go to the Imperial camp. What camp? All the Imperial hunters have set up fortification on the beach to the northeast. It's the easiest landmark to aim for. Meanwhile, we see Boba and a different warlord, Warlord 1, making his way to Team Imperial. Boss has all sorts of questions because, they also saw the ship. What happened? It was Rada's fault. Thrawn arrived to make sure his admirals weren't being mistreated, and Rada opened fire. Thrawn was forced to disable the ship. And this next line doesn't make sense for Bossk, so I would just want one of the nondescript bounty hunters to say it. With my visuals, I think Bazine is the best person because she's like an obnoxious 15-year-old. Disable? He blew it up! What matters is we have to find Rada. If he dies, none of us get what we want. Me and Boba will go. The rest of you, hold the position. With all of you together, you might be enough. Now, Boba, let's go hunt some frogs. We see yet another escape pod at the bottom of a hill, clearly having had a rough landing. The door opens, and Ward comes out, followed by Grogu. Grogu is fine, but Ward is limping, and it's clear she had a broken arm. Maybe some cuts on the face as well that can be done with makeup. A frog comes out. Ward tries to shield Grogu, but she's weak and unarmed, and Grogu just walks right past her. He raises his hand and squints his eyes, and then he walks up to the frog and touches his face. The frog rivets and just hops away. Did you just use the Force to tame the frog? No, says a voice from the trees. A garbled voice. It's the patron. Ward, despite her injuries, gets between Grogu and the stranger. Who are you? The Force flows through all living things. The child simply felt the creature's presence and sensed that it only meant harm to those it considers a threat. The patron removes her helmet. My name is Maz Kanata. I'm here to help. Boba and Bossk are walking through the woods. Bossk is yapping about how useless the new breed of bounty hunters is and how the real killers are a dying breed. He starts reminiscing about a story, which I'm not going to write, but it's like a, hey, remember that job kind of thing, where he describes him and Boba doing some horrible thing to people who definitely didn't deserve it. Maybe Boba disintegrated someone, since we know that that's something he used to do. Boba is nodding along and filling in details where Bossk forgets, but he's clearly not enjoying the story. Bossk is reminding him of the man he used to be, which he isn't anymore. This is, in my opinion, the biggest failing of the Boba Fett show. I don't like that you're making Boba into an uncomplicated good guy, but if you are, then you have to reckon with the fact that Boba spent decades doing bad shit. Like, there was not any scenes that I can remember from the Book of Boba Fett. Not that I rewatched it for this video, so I could have just forgotten. But I don't remember any scene where Boba, is confronted with the fact that he, ruined families, he murdered people, not all of whom deserved it. He was a bad dude for a long time. He needs to be confronted with that at some point. That's such an obvious thing to do with this version of the character. Legitimately, right, writing this portion, I got mad again at the Book of Boba Fett for being so incompetently written. I don't understand what happened to that show. God. Also, the Moss thing, we are going to talk about it later. I didn't forget. There will be an explanation. Boba and Bosk's conversation is interrupted by a scream, which can only belong to Rada the Hutt. The two hunters run toward the sound, only to find Rada surrounded by dead frogs and laughing. "Hello, friends. You're too late. I already got them all." Boba sighs and just says, "Come on, let's get you to camp." Ward is talking to Maz. "So you're not with the New Republic? I'm a friend and ally of some of your generals, but no, I am not part of your republic." "Why did you join Rada's competition then?" "To win, of course. Sell the planets to the New Republic for a nice profit, keep it out of the Empire's hands, and cripple the Hutt's activities. But things have changed. I really need to call my contact in the New Republic and shut this down." "You have means of long-range communication? Where did you hide it?" "In pieces." She starts taking little pieces of greebling off her outfit and puts them together into a machine. "Where's the battery? They would have noticed that on your person. The Pike must have hid his in his helmet." "That's where our little friend comes in." She picks up Grogu and takes a piece of technology out of the folds of his little outfit. "They didn't bother to search him properly. They always underestimate the smaller of us." And if this isn't clear, she hid this thing on Grogu when she picked him up in that earlier scene. Boba and Bossk are escorting Rada, and they're almost back. They get briefly separated by some frogs, and in the moment where he's alone, Boba presses on his helmet and tries to contact Din, but he says something like, "Damn, still out of range," and reunites with Rada and Bossk. "Hey, Boba, they say you died the same day as my father." "Yes, I was working for Jabba the day my jetpack malfunctioned." "Do you know what happened to him?" "His barge exploded. Everyone within was lost to the sands before I emerged." "Do you know who did it?" "Some prisoners of Jabba's. The Jedi Skywalker was among them." "I've heard of him." "He led his rebel friends to rescue a prisoner of Jabba, Han Solo." He has some emotion behind that last name, since obviously Solo was a bigger part of his life than any of the others. Rada still wants to know who killed him, but Boba doesn't have the answer. They make it back to the Imperial camp. Din and Zeb are walking at a leisurely pace since they don't really have a direction in mind. Zeb is carrying the captured Imperial over his shoulder. They have a conversation. Maybe Din wants to hear more about Sabine, or maybe Zeb wants to hear more about the code. Either way, it's exposition that gives our characters a chance to have opinions about something, but it's not super important. I'm just putting this in for pacing, and so we know what all the characters are up to before the start of Act 3. Or maybe this is already Act 3, I don't know. Now, Maz is almost done with her machine. She starts talking to Grogu. "My young friend, but you're not so young, are you? I remember one or two of your people, and they grow quite old, almost as old as me. They were powerful Jedi." Grogu coos or something. "You could be a powerful Jedi yourself. I'm not strong like you, but I can sense these things. You have already had some training, haven't you? The old Jedi or the new?" Grogu kind of looks down. "Both, yes, I think both. I met both as well. Both Yoda of the old Jedi and Skywalker of the new tried to recruit me. I had to tell them both politely that it was not the life for me." Grogu kind of perks up at that. "The Jedi are good people, Grogu. Remember well the lessons they taught you. But," she touches his Mandalorian breastplate thing, "you have chosen a different path, just like me. You are both Jedi and Mandalorian now, just as I am both rebel and pirate. And your experiences from both worlds will make you stronger." Or, something along those lines. A professional writer could probably get more emotion behind that. Then Maz finishes her machine and turns it on. "Hello, this is Maz Kanata. Do you read?" A very garbled voice comes back saying, "Maz, this better be an emergency." "Only if you count being stranded on an island full of wanted criminals an emergency." Din and Zeb are walking in silence when suddenly we hear feedback and we start hearing the conversation. Din stops. Zeb asks what's going on, and Din says, "I can hear a conversation. Someone's contacting someone off-world. Do you know a Maz?" Zeb doesn't. "At my location, I have a wounded New Republic colonel and a child." "She has Grogu." "Oh no." Zeb is confused. "She doesn't know that Mandalorian helmets can pick up and decrypt those signals. She's going to..." "Oh, yes, when you get to the island, here are my coordinates. 21.40, 32... Din types the coordinates into some sort of interface on his sleeve and launches his jetpack. Zeb grumbles and starts running on in the same direction, still carrying the Imperial on his back. The Imperial's confused. He asks, "What's going on? Why the rush?" In the Imperial camp, Boba is listening to the end of the transmission. He and the hunter look at each other, both of them clearly having heard the message on their own Mandalorian helmets, and the hunter starts booking it, abandoning the Imperial camp. You'll notice I'm being a little vague about whether or not the hunter has a jetpack. That's on purpose. I think that the hunter should not have a jetpack because the other two Mandalorians do, and it's better for, like, you know, character design variety if she doesn't. Also, that would make her look more like the armor, which I mentioned is something that I want to subtly do. On the other hand, she does need to be fast enough to, spoiler alert, beat Din to Grogu and get away. So maybe she has like rocket boots or something. Like, she probably needs some way to be fast. Like, yeah, let's say it's rocket boots. She has rocket boots. Boba hesitates and then starts off in that direction as well. But before he can leave, Bossk stops him. Now, where are you going? My helmet picked up a signal. One of the patrons is off in that direction. The Mando woman is on it. You can stay here and protect the fort. Or I could go. You haven't been the same, Boba. Hesitating to shoot the monsters, letting me take command instead of you, not laughing at that amazing story. You've gone soft, haven't you, Boba? That's where you've really been. Both of them start moving their hands toward their weapons. Boba says, you watch who you talk to. And Bossk says, I could say the same. They fight. I don't have choreography, but Bossk is a very physical fighter who tries to close the distance and grab onto Boba to prevent him from flying. And I want it to be that Boba has the upper hand between them, and he would win if it was just the two, but the other bounty hunters step in and attack Boba, and Boba's got no chance against the group. These are skilled fighters after all. Boba is good, but he's not that good. They're all roughly in the same tier, with Boba at the top, but, you know, he's not 3 times as good, not even twice as good as any of these individuals. Boba is on the ground, and Bossk takes off his jetpack and blasts it to pieces. One of the other hunters goes to kill Boba, but Bossk stops them, saying he's a friend. The other hunter insists that Boba concede his claim for Rada's prize, and Boba just laughs and says nobody's getting the prize now, but he does concede after being hit a few times. We get another scene of Maz and Grogu, where she imparts some more wisdom. I don't know exactly what she would say here, but something about her history as a Force-sensitive pirate, and that is why I wanted to include Maz. She is the only character I can think of who has Force abilities and chose not to pursue them. Like, she chose not to get more powerful in the Force. She just decided to become a pirate. And that's very similar to what we have here with Grogu. He chose to stop training as a Jedi to be a Mandalorian and be in the same kind of gritty, scoundrel, criminal world that Maz is. And also, Maz is wise and short and alien. Like, she is kind of supposed to be a stand-in for Yoda in The Force Awakens. So it makes so much sense for Maz to be the person who is wise and gives some wisdom to Grogu. And we do need that character. I think in the actual movie, this character will exist and will be this weird dinosaur thing that's in the trailers. But, I mean, yeah, obviously, if you're going to give growth to Grogu, then you need someone to kind of explain his own arc to him, because he can't talk. This could be a random character. Before I thought of Maz, I thought like, oh, we could just have the same dinosaur character who's just living on the island. But I think it is better if it's Maz, partly because, you know, it's not a contrivance that she's there. She's there for the same reason that everyone else is. But also, you know, Maz is cool, and it makes sense for her to hang out with Grogu. This is actually a good time to have a movie instead of a show, because Maz is a big cameo. Like, it would be distracting for her to just show up in a random episode of The Mandalorian. She's also expensive, like both the CGI and Lupita Nyong'o's time. That's not a TV budget sort of thing. But a movie, you know, you could have that. Suddenly, the hunter bursts through the trees. Grogu uses the Force on her, but she has gadgets to counter that, and grabs him. She also grabs Maz's communicator before she runs off, and escapes much too fast for Ward and Maz to follow. Din and Zeb arrive, but they're too late to do anything. Zeb is happy to reunite with Ward, but Din is very upset. Din hears the hunter's voice in his helmet, using the transponder, and telling him her location and inviting him to come talk. It's clear she plans to kill Grogu and force Din to watch, but we can leave that in subtext if it's too dark. She says that if Din doesn't come alone, or if the New Republic arrives before they've settled things, she'll kill Grogu. Din is freaking out, but he also gets a different signal. He thinks it's the Hunter and calibrates something on his helmet until he hears it's not the Hunter, it's Boba. Boba says he doesn't have that much time, they haven't removed his helmet yet, but they're going to. He's restrained in the Imperial camp. Everyone's here except the Hunter, including Rada and one of the Imperial officers. Boba says, Din, I heard the Hunter's message. I'm sorry. You focus on rescuing your boy. I'll be okay here. Din looks around at the gathered allies and sits down for a minute. He has no idea what to do. Intermission time. We are at the end of Act 2, sort of. I mean, this is my marker for the end of Act 2, but, you know, my Act 3 is pretty short, so you could move the goalposts and be like, oh, actually, Act 2 was Nar Shaddaa and the Rebel base, and everything that happens on the island is Act 3. I think it's better for pacing if you do it this way, even if Act 3 is really short. The obvious solution also is to just make Act 3 longer. I'm going to talk more about my regrets with the pacing in the part after we finish the movie, and I can just talk about my thoughts. So what is our intermission conversation? I don't have any more big scrapped ideas or things to explain. So it just says grovel for engagement. So please comment if you have any thoughts or whether or not you like this kind of video, if you want to see more of them. I'm going to do more of them. This was a lot of fun, but I'm also not going to for a while because it was a lot of work. Like, my God, it took me so long to write and then record and then editing this. Oh my God, that was not a pleasant experience. And I have to edit these, commentary bits into the video. That's going to take hours. It's the day before I plan to release this. If this comes out on Friday, I had a terrible night the night before. I mean, do I need to say anything? Anyway, so, comment what you think. If I get a lot of comments saying this was really fun, please do. I'm not going to do any more pitches unless the fancy takes me, but rewrites, I got a couple rewrites that I want to do if I get the time. I want to do like every movie in the DCEU with Henry Cavill. Like, I think those had a lot of potential and they're ripe for the sort of rewriting process. I have an idea for the sequels, but it's kind of ambitious and I need to go track down some books to read before I do that. But both of those projects will move up in the priorities if I get a bunch of comments that say that they really like this, even if this video doesn't do well. Speaking of which, I have no idea how many views this is going to get. My videos have been somewhat variable in view count. There are orders of magnitude of difference. So if this gets 100 views, disregard. But if it gets 50,000 views, I'm probably going to reach a couple artists. So I just want to say you have my full permission to draw any scenes or characters that I created in this story. You have my blessing. That would be really cool. You can post it, make money off it, whatever. I would like you to credit me as your inspiration or one of your inspirations, but you don't have to. But if you do, it would be cool if you emailed me just to let me know. That would bring a smile to my face. My email is in my channel description. I don't have a Twitter or a Patreon or a Discord or anything. Maybe I will when I'm big. When I reach 10 million subscribers, you'll see me start every video with remember to like, share, follow the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tinder, Grindr, OnlyFans. I don't have any of those right now, at least not for the channel. But I have an email. I'm plugging my Gmail account for this channel. Yeah. Also, the emails are a really great place to send hate mail. Din has to relay all the information to the others, but let's do that off screen and focus on Grogu. The Hunter takes him into a clearing, killing frogs along the way. Grogu is squirming and trying to move his hand, but the Hunter keeps restraining him and ruining his focus. This is up to the director to communicate, but it's clear that Grogu can't use the Force under these conditions. He needs to be unrestrained and have a couple seconds to concentrate. Obviously, a real Jedi doesn't have these issues, but Grogu's not a real Jedi. He's an infant, so I think it's, a good limitation to have. Back to Din and the gang. Din wants to help Grogu, but Maz cautions patience. Her contact won't be here for a little while, so they have some time to think. Din does not want to stop to think. He needs me. He's helpless without me. No, he's not. He's stronger and braver than you know. Someone has to save him. You're right, but it doesn't have to be you. And he's not the only one that needs saving. Let us make a plan. We don't see this plan get made. Boba is helmetless and shackled. All around him, the other hunters are divvying up his weapons. Bossk is wearing his wrist-mounted launcher and something on his knee that fires something. The others really depend on who they are, but for my picks, let's say Bazine is wearing the helmet and has a lot of explosives, and the IG unit has Boba's guns. The villains are even more powerful than they were when they beat Boba, so Din would have no chance against this group. Bossk starts talking to Boba, asking him what happened, and Boba answers honestly, recaps the events of the Book of Boba Fett, talks about how he was humbled by his experiences and learned the value of looking out for others instead of just himself. And this just makes Bossk angry. He feels that Boba is insulting their way of life, which Boba kind of is. But Boba is trying to reach out. Remember, these two are old friends who were on the same page for years. Boba wants to bring Bossk around to his way of thinking if he can, but Bossk doesn't want to listen. He just sees this as ridiculous and soft and gross. Cut to the hunter, who is holding Grogu tightly. I'd like a scene with her and the frogs. I'd like for the lesson about not fighting the frogs to be important to the finale, not just something for Grogu to do. And even if it doesn't have any major plot stuff in the climax, I'd like something to happen in Act 3. So here's what I came up with. The hunter comes upon a frog and draws her gun. Grogu tries to put a hand over the gun, but the hunter just, holds him back and shoots the frog, unprovoked. The noise draws other frogs, and she shoots those too. This only draws more and more frogs, which she kills in cool Mandalorian ways, maybe using a round of her whistling birds. And the cycle continues until she's surrounded by an army of frogs, and she screams. Back to Boba and Bossk. Boba sees a flash of something in the trees. Sharp-eyed viewers will realize this is Embo, or his dog if you're including him in the story, but you'll notice I have not. Rada clearly noticed something too, because he makes some excuse and leaves, a little quicker than normal. The other hunters don't really notice, and Boba smirks a little. Back to Grogu and his captor. She's ragged, a little unhinged, and surrounded by dead frogs. She sees Silver, and we see the Mandalorian step out of the trees. He's looking worse for wear, limping. His arms are at his side, but one of them seems to be a little limp. The hunter is, a little crazed. There you are, Din. Do you have anything to say? Anything to stop me from killing your child? The Mandalorian just stands there. Say something. Tell me why it was so important that you abandoned the creed, abandoned the way of the Mandalore. She's so impassioned about this that she drops Grogu, who scampers out of the way, holds his hand out, and starts concentrating. Then, a few things happen in very quick succession. The hunter starts by saying, "Why won't you answer me, Din?" To which the Mandalorian removes the helmet to reveal that it's Ward under there, not Din. She says some one-liner, and Zeb emerges from the trees and shoots the hunter in the head, using the distraction to get a shot off. The hunter is disoriented, but the armor protects her. Grogu continues concentrating, and the whistling birds on the hunter's wrist begin to glow. The hunter fires at Ward. She hits, but the armor protects her. She goes to shoot Zeb. Before she can, Grogu clenches his fist, and all of the whistling birds fire out of the hunter's gauntlet aimed at her, hitting her with several explosions that stun her. By the time she gets up, Zeb is on her with the bow rifle and tases her into unconsciousness. Meanwhile, Din is leading Maz, who is in turn leading the captured Imperial with a gun, using some bounty hunter skills of some sort to track Embo. We get some indication from the geography that they're very close to the Imperial camp. Din is wearing whatever he would have been wearing under the armor, like an undershirt and pants. He's going to get a new outfit very soon, so it doesn't matter. Eventually, Embo comes out from behind him, but seeing Maz, he reveals himself. Maz asks him if there's any place they can drop off this guy, since they have the Imperial with them, and Embo leads them into a cave where he has restrained the bounty hunters we haven't seen so far, and maybe another one of the captured Imperials. I don't know. They could have also just died. I don't care. Maz congratulates Embo. She says, "Oh, good work." And then she turns to Jin and says, "I told him I'd pay him extra if he didn't kill anyone." Din is also impressed. "You've been under the Imp's noses the whole time and they had no idea." Maz and Embo speak for a bit in Embo's language, no subtitles. Maz relates all the information she learned. Embo says Fed is alive, but restrained and stripped of some of his armor. Well, that's good. He wasn't communicating because they took his helmet, not because he was killed. Embo nods. Embo says the hunters were armed to the teeth before, and now they have Fet's weapons. A direct assault is impossible, and their guard discipline is too good for stealth. Looks like we need to use Ward's idea after all. Both Maz and Din look at the captured Imperial officer. Back to the game that has Grogu. Zeb is using the tracker to walk to Din's location, and he's carrying Grogu in one hand because it's the babysitter, and he's also carrying the hunter over his shoulder, which maybe that's too many hands. Maybe Ward is using the tracker. I don't know. Ward has the armor off, and she's carrying it in a duffel bag of some sort. "I hope everything works." Zeb says he trusted us to do our part, now we have to trust them to do theirs. Back at the Imperial camp, from Boba's perspective, and the guards on Team Imp, there's sound of movement in the trees. The hunters all train their blasters on it, but there's a yell. "Don't shoot, I'm one of you." Din Djarin, dressed in the uniform of the Imperial officer, emerges with his hands up. Bossk says, "Who are you?" "Imperial Admiral," and then he says the name of the captured Imperial he stole the outfit from. I don't have a name for him other than Imp 2. "All right, come in." "Whose patron are you? I don't recognize you." "The Mandalorian woman." "Choose a better hunter next time. Yours deserted us, and before that, she offered supplies to an enemy." Well, I gather there was some history between those two. At this point, Din is entering the camp. Imp 1 starts gawking and says, "Hey, I don't know you." Din yells, "Now!" and ducks for cover and starts shooting at the hunters. Then, out of the trees comes Embo. If it's not too goofy in live action, maybe the camp is at the bottom of a hill and Embo sleds down in his hat like he did in the snow that one time. This fight takes a while. Embo and Din are better fighters, but they're under-equipped compared to the 3 hunters with Boba's gear, so they have to duck for cover a lot. Embo's using his hat as a shield a bunch. This is the big climactic action scene, so I imagine we can milk it a little bit. I want the tide to change when Din frees Boba, and Boba does something cool, even though he doesn't have his stuff. Maybe he uses a hidden weapon that they didn't find because he's Boba Fett and he always has another gadget, or maybe he takes someone down without any gadgets because he's Boba Fett and he doesn't need his fancy gadgets to be a badass. Anyway, whatever. I don't have a favorite. Honestly, you can choose. Maz, during this fight, is just standing guard over Embo's prisoners. There's a version of this fight scene where she's there. We know she can fight, so it feels wrong not to have her, but I think this fight works better if the good guys are outnumbered, so sorry, Maz fans. She has to wait in the cave. Zeb and Grogu and Ward all show up, while Din, Embo, and Maz are just finishing up disarming the 4 prisoners. Or 3 if one of the hunters is an IG unit, you just blow that thing's head off. Din and Grogu have a heartfelt reunion. Zeb says something about how Grogu was the real hero of the day, and Din tells Grogu that he's proud of him, and they have an emotional exchange. Din also tells Zeb that he's sorry he didn't trust them. So stuff like that. Emotional payoff kind of type shit. Then once the emotion of the scene wears off, Din gets uncomfortable without his armor, says something like, "Wow, I haven't been without my armor in front of so many people, I'm gonna go change." And he grabs the duffel bag and goes behind a tree. Boba asks if Maz's communicator is hardwired to her contact or if it can be used to communicate with anyone. She says anyone, so he borrows it to call Fennec, who is fine. She says all the Imperials left once Rada did, so she got to the Slave One and she's been on Tatooine recuperating. She offers to come pick him up, but he says it's fine and he'll get back on his own. Also, we don't have to call it the Slave One if Disney is too much of a coward to say it. We can dance around the name. So, what about Rada? He fled before the fighting started. Embo thinks he caught wind of him. Then we should go after him. Or we could wait. Moss's contact in the New Republic will be here soon. It's not like Rada can go anywhere. Actually, if he used this place for smuggling, he probably has a ship hidden somewhere. What? Why would you be so calm? What if he gets away? I have a feeling things will work themselves out. Suddenly, Maz's comlink goes off in Boba's hand. It's Maz's contact. He's here. Maz says, now that feeling is a certainty. Cut to our one and only scene that doesn't feature Din, Grogu, or Boba. A special scene. This is our Darth Vader in the hallway moment. This is our big fan servicey slot fest. Rada is moving as fast as his slug body will carry him to a wall of rock. He presses a secret panel that looks like just a natural part of the cliffside, and part of the cliff slides open to reveal a tunnel through which we see a large clearing with a ship. He sighs in relief, but as he emerges from the tunnel, he sees that there are two ships, his own and the Millennium Falcon. Chewbacca is there, petting one of the frog creatures, and Han Solo, played by Alden Ehrenreich, gives that classic shrug. How did you know about this place? Only my father knew about it. That's not quite true. He told some of his best smugglers about it too. You're him, Han Solo, the smuggler turned rebel. You killed my father. Whoa there, I didn't kill Jabba as much as I wanted to. God damn, it's fucking 1 a.m. Why are people dropping... God damn... I don't even know where I was in the script. You killed my father. Whoa there. I didn't kill Jabba as much as I wanted to. My amazing wife took care of that. Strangled him with his own chain. It's a great story. I wish I could have seen it. Enraged, Rada starts spinning his axes and charges at Han, who shoots him dead. Because, of course it's Han Solo. Lower stakes movie based on the criminal aspect of Star Wars, heavily involving the legacy of Jabba the Hutt. Han Solo is perfect for this. I actually knew I wanted Han Solo to be the big cameo at the end before I wanted Maz to be in it. But of course it makes so much sense that that's how Han enters the story, is that she's Maz's contact. He's kind of high ranking, so if it was Ward would not be calling Han Solo. He's above her pay grade, and he might not even be in the New Republic military. But Maz, she needs someone who's a personal friend, who's affiliated with the New Republic, but will let some things slide, like not arresting Embo. Although, actually, that is a discussion to have. Embo, canonically, it was pardoned of all of his crimes and works for the New Republic now, which is something that I didn't remember, but it actually makes so much sense that he's working for Maz. Not that Maz is part of the New Republic, but that, he's a nicer person, and Maz would be like, oh, can I borrow him for something? That actually worked out really well. I wanted Embo to be heroic before I even knew that canonically he should be at this point in the story. The Falcon arrives at the Imperial camp. Let's have both Boba and Bossk say one of those stupid Mandalorian swear words, since they would both recognize the ship and know who's in it. Han comes out and greets Maz warmly, and makes a comment about needing some more room since the good guys have so many prisoners. Then Han notices Boba, and it's awkward, but Maz vouches for him. Before they leave, Din stops. So, who wins? Everyone is confused. Rada's contest. Who gets the territory? Oh, child, with Rada dead, nobody's going to enforce his offer. So this whole thing was just for nothing? Well, other than capturing several dangerous criminals and Imperial warlords, 4 of the most important Hutts are dead. The central Hutt worlds will remain under Hutt control, but the remaining Hutts will be too weak to claim any of the outlying worlds that they never had a tight grip on. Like Tatooine. Exactly. So no, I don't think this was for nothing. And, if nothing else, your child had quite the adventure. And, for the first people in the New Republic to see Thrawn and get a glimpse of what he's planning. Thrawn? Yes, I'll need to speak to the Chancellor right away. Let's see Leia first. You know she'll want to know before the Chancellor does. The people pile onto the Falcon, and Han starts asking where everyone wants to be dropped off. Maz and Embo are going to Takodana. Boba is going to Tatooine. Zeb and Ward are going with Han all the way to liaise with the New Republic. And finally, it's Din's turn. He says, what do you say, Grogu? You want to visit home? And Ward stops him. She says, hold on. I haven't gotten you your planetary detox yet. And even when I do, it'll take a few weeks for that volcano to stop. I know. I'm at a different home. We're going to Mandalore. Hard cut to Mandalore. Grogu is playing on some sort of stylized version of a classic playground with Mandalorian children, some of whom are wearing helmets and some are not. Din is watching them from a chair with the armorer. The hunter was always a bit erratic, but she was one of us. It took some convincing, but her captors agreed to let her keep the armor on for the trial. That was a kindness. She believes in the creed very strongly. A moment passes. Thank you for telling me about your transgressions. It was a brave thing admitting that. Thank you for not reacting as the hunter did. Perhaps I would have once, but so much has changed. We thought Mandalore was uninhabitable, but here we are, with the children of 4 different clans playing together on its surface. What it means to be a Mandalorian is changing, and we must change as well. Adapt, as we always have. This is the way. This is the way. They sit in silence, and maybe the movie ends here, similar to Season 3 did. Or we could squeeze in a joke. Since the armor is kind of a stand-in for Din's mother, especially in this story, I like the idea that she cuts the tension with some sort of embarrassing non sequitur. "Oh, when are you getting a girlfriend?" Something like that. It's a real problem with Thrawn in particular, is that he keeps losing because, the heroes have to get some wins. And then Disney is like, "Oh, Thrawn, isn't he cool?" And it's like, no, he kept losing because the heroes kept beating him. All right, we're at the end. My other commentary sections were roughly scripted. This is just all off the dome. So this is just what I have to say about what I think of how this process went. You're going to get a lot of umming and pauses because I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm much better with a script. This is why I'm not going to do live streams. I think this went really well. This is the kind of movie that I would want to see. So there's a lot more bounty hunters and cool hype moments and aura than would probably be in a better movie. But we're not looking for the best made movie. We're looking for a fun movie. And I think that this is fun. People underestimate how important hype moments and aura are. I was 7 when I watched the Star Wars movie that got me into Star Wars, and that was The Phantom Menace. And Jar Jar, I didn't like Jar Jar, but I liked Darth Maul. The kids love cool, evil badasses. So that's my defense of making a gritty crime movie for for the kids. The kids love gritty crime. You just gotta trust them. What else? I really liked how I was able to use all of the rebel characters. Like Ward and Zeb, I was including in the first act because I kind of had to, but I appreciate how useful they were later in terms of giving Mando and Grogu someone to hang out with. Especially since, I don't know if you noticed this, but I was doing a very tight POV limitation where you only have a scene with either Din, Grogu, or Boba Fett. I think that is... I've heard that that's a storytelling trick that they use in movies. Obviously, it's a thing they do in books. I heard that A New Hope does that with Luke, Leia, Vader, and the droids, but that's just not true because there's Obi-Wan turning off the things, and a couple other random scenes, like Grand Moff Tarkin getting blown up. That's not true. It's more true of my story than of A New Hope, but it's still a fun technique. Yeah, Zeb especially was a real MVP in this. I'm really glad with how I was able to use him. Boba Fett, on the other hand, my goat got dogged. I'm so sorry if you're a Boba Fett fan. He got to do nothing. He got imprisoned for half the movie. He got some good fights. I won't say that he was humiliated or anything, but I can understand why people would want me to use him more if I was going to use him. I like what I did with him with having to face his past and that he has no regrets. I also like that he was kind of pretending to be back in with the gang. Maybe in another draft, I would remove the communication between Din and Boba in Act 2 and have it be oh wow, it really looks like Boba is evil again. And then it's a twist for Din, if not the audience, that Boba actually is a good guy and he was just pretending to hang out with those people. I think that might be effective, but no, I like it the way it was because it we know from the get-go that Boba is trying to fit in with people who he isn't like anymore. I think the parallels that has to Din's arc make it work more than a twist would. Speaking of which, I like Din's arc. I really like how it ended with the hunter. It's a little contrived of like, why would he give up his armor just so that Ward can get like a 2 second distraction? But there are a couple things I like. I like that the thematic solution to dealing with an abusive family member is to disengage. Like if Din went to face her, it would be like, oh, if your family members don't accept you, then you have to confront them. And I think that like the answer being like, no, go do something more important. Let someone else take care of that is a really nice answer. I also like that it gave the rebel characters something to do. Ward and Zeb are like the most good guy characters, so it's nice that they got something to do. And that Din did not trust them before, but he does now, and he's letting someone else take care of Grogu when his flaw in the movie was that he thinks that he's the only one who can take care of him, and he understands at the end like, no, I have to let other people do this. We have two different things we have to do. I would be more useful here with the Boba Fett thing. It took me a long time to figure out how Din taking off his helmet would be important in the finale, because obviously not obviously maybe, but I wanted it to be like he's hesitant about taking his helmet off, but it turns out that taking off your helmet ended up being useful. Nothing could be as contrived as that fucking scanner from season 2, but I think him dressing up as an Imperial and pretending to be one, and this disguise only working because his face is showing and none of the bounty hunters recognize who he is, I think that works. And I did not, I got to Act 3 without realizing where I was going to go with this, and then I was like, oh my god, they have a captured Imperial, this is great. Speaking of the captured Imperial, there are a lot of prisoners in this movie. That's something that I did not want. It's just something that kind of happened. That is a regret of mine. But that's just kind of what happens in Star Wars when you have a fight with only one person. Like if Din just shot the Imperial in the head, that would be too dark. And you can't just strand them out somewhere because the frogs will eat them. Or at least that's what Din thought. Speaking of which, the frogs, I thought could be more utilized. I like how they work. Oh my god, I never told you why they were frogs. I want Grogu to have this, choice. I want him to figure out something that no one else does, and what he figures out is that you don't have to fight the frogs. And the reason he knows that is that his approach to animals is not to immediately be aggressive, but to understand that they're living beings just like you and me. And the reason he knows that is because of that fuck-ass episode where he ate that frog woman's eggs, and then he saw them turn into tadpoles, and he was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I understand the value of life now. It's such a terrible arc, but it's the only character arc that Grogu has in the entire show is learning not to eat eggs. Oh, it's so gross. So I wanted to reference that, and that's why these characters are frogs, is because he's got a whole thing with frogs. What else? I don't know. I like what I did with Thrawn, but I already explained why. I like what I did with Nevarro. I don't like that IG-11 was back, but I think I used him adequately. The main plot with Rada's bargain is a little contrived, but I think it fits Rada's character that he would do such a ridiculous thing because he wants attention. It is kind of crazy that the rebels didn't just put a stop to it, but I just had vague Hutt things that whatever was preventing people from taking over the Hutts before is in place now, and that's why nobody can mess with Rada except when he exposes himself on this random planet. I don't love that nobody won Rada's challenge. I feel like it kind of makes sense, but my original thought was that Embo wins. He fully wins, and Maz gets all the stuff, and she wins. She gets, she totally profits from this. Yay, Maz. I still think that's a fun idea, but I think it's I liked the little Aesop at the end where Din thinks everything was for nothing, and Maz explains to the children in the audience why this story was important. Um, I don't know. I don't love it. It feels wrong to have that set up without any payoff, but at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Rada to die and then the challenge to still be in place. And I did want Rada to die because I wanted Han to get to kill a Hutt, and I thought it would be fun to parody the Indiana Jones scene. I think that would be a fun like capstone to all of this ridiculous like melee combat in this movie. It's like, no, fuck that. Guns are better. I don't want guns are better to be the last thing I say in this video, but I can't think of anything else. So I'll just open it to you guys. What do you think? What did you like and what did you dislike? You know, if you liked it unequivocally, then then you weren't watching hard enough. You know, every YouTube video and every story should have at least one thing that you disagree with, and every bad story / video should have something that you do like. But that's not important. Just comment whatever you want to comment. If you watch the movie, then let me know what you think, especially with like, you know, specific details like, the actual movie included this character who I think would have been cool in the story, or, it's, you know, it's cool that you included Boba Fett. It's kind of ridiculous that they didn't include him in the movie. You know, I really liked your idea, but it's too bad we didn't get that awesome fight in the main movie that wouldn't work here. So, you know, whatever, stuff like that. I will be liking those comments, but I will not respond to them until I've seen the movie, and I'm not going to watch it opening weekend. I might not even watch it in theaters. I have no excitement for it. And, well, I had a little excitement for it, but I've poured all of that excitement into this video, and after that, I just don't care. And speaking of which, I'm going to take a break from Star Wars for a little bit. I have some other videos I want to make about fantasy, and Supergirl is going to be released soon. I might do a video about the DCU. And then my next rewrite is probably going to be Man of Steel, if I don't think of anything more interesting. So, you know, if you love Star Wars, despite appearances, my plan is not to be a Star Wars account. Like, I'm going to do other stuff. I'm going to do another Game of Thrones video, even though the first one didn't do well, because I want to. So, yeah, let me know what you think, and, you know, recommend this to all your friends.